Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the NXTGEN Racing Intercontinental Challenge Championship for 2021, as brought to you in the GT3 class on Assetto Corsa Competitione on PC. And tonight marks round 3 of the 5-round calendar, where our drivers tonight will be heading to a circuit down under, that is the Mount Panorama circuit in Australia, for what is expected to be a rather difficult race. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But of course, before we can get to the race, let's take you through our schedule for tonight. Time's been in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT or UTC. In approximately 14.5 minutes, we'll be getting underway with the driver's briefing at 7:25 tonight. Our drivers being given the lay of the land and the rules and the ins and outs, particularly to this round. And then straight after the driver's briefing, we'll be getting underway with qualifying, the 15-minute session to determine who will be on pole for the purposes of our race. That being our single feature race, the 90-minute race, which will kick off at approximately 7:45 tonight, where our drivers will be expected to go all in with the strategy and indeed their outright pace to see what kind of results they can get. And the target, of course, will will be for everyone to score as high as possible and try to secure the win. After that, we'll be bringing you post-race interviews with our podium finishers. That's our top 3 at 9:15, and we'll be wrapping up following those interviews. Now, in the commentary box tonight, you have myself, as always, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And with regards to this broadcast tonight, it's being brought to you on 3 media platforms. Firstly, the official NXTGEN Racing YouTube channel. That's NXTGEN Racing on YouTube. Alternatively, the official NXTGEN Racing Facebook group. That's facebook.com/groups/NXTGEN Racing, or if you're Twitch inclined, you can always tune in using my personal Twitch channel, that is TX141 on Twitch. Now, before we go any further into the racing, it's time to give a massive shout out to our senior partners for this series, our sponsors, who without them it would not be possible to bring you all this racing action in the Intercontinental Challenge Championship. That is the SimGrid and Coach Dave Academy, and we'll start off with introducing the SimGrid. So who are the SimGrid and what do they stand for, I hear you ask? Well, the SimGrid is a place for amateur and professional sim racers to compete against fellow drivers in leagues and endurance events for Assetto Corsa Competizione. And more recently as well, expanding to the R-Factor 2 racing platform, the SimGrid is a place whether you are a rookie or a professional or somewhere in between, or you're looking to do a one-off race or looking to organise a charity event, they are the place to go to for all racing events relating to Assetto Corsa Competizione on PC and also R-Factor 2 on the PC. A brilliant place to go if you're looking for a league, and indeed they're working with us to brand this league and also expand its horizons and advertise it out to all of the relative participants, and indeed many of the individuals that are racing in this series would not have known about this series if it were not for the power of the SimGrid, so we're very grateful to have them on board. Now, outside of the SimGrid, we've also got Coach Dave Academy, or CDA in short, and they are the home of amateur and professional sim racers looking to up their game through coaching, setups and track maps. And if you're interested, why not check out CoachDaveAcademy.com today to take your racing to the next level, because whether you're trying to gain a tenth of a second, a whole second, or just looking for a more stable setup on the car, Coach Dave Academy, with their predetermined setups, with their track maps, and indeed their coaching sessions, fantastic place to find out all that information plus plenty more. Indeed also on their Discord, you can speak with their coaches, including the likes of James Parker and David Perel, very famous names, a fantastic resource of information. That's Coach Dave Academy, and indeed they're not just restricted to Assetto Corsa Competizione, they also do a lot of work within the iRacing sphere, another sim racing platform on the PC. So that's CoachDaveAcademy.com if you do want to know more. Now, as we move away from our primary sponsors and come on to the season ahead, well, after 2 weeks, we have completed our first 2 rounds. Of course, we started off in Suzuka on the 23rd of November. We moved to Kyalami on the 30th of November. And after what was a rather oddball race weekend last time out at Kyalami, with qualifying being turned into a one-lap shootout right at the start, with rain coming down midway through the qualifying session, or really in the opening minutes, and it was a sprint for everybody to try and get out onto the circuit and put in a lap before the rain reduced the pace of the qualifying laps and essentially nullified further qualifying attempts. It was a dry race at Kyalami afterwards, with the circuit drying up very rapidly after the rainy qualifying session, and we saw a complete mix-up in our finishing results, and we'll come on to those when we take a look at the championship standings. But as of tonight, we head to Australia, so going from South Africa to Australia to the Mount Panorama Raceway Circuit, known in short as Bathurst. It's the 7th of December 2021 today, and round 3 has got plenty of surprises in store, no doubt, and from what I'm hearing right now, it is a case that it is incredibly wet in real-world Australia, and we are replicating that here today within this league, and it is incredibly rainy conditions, and we'll get to show you those very shortly. But the Bathurst being perhaps the most daunted circuit for most of our drivers in this series, and we look forward to seeing how they all get on. Now, speaking of our drivers, here are the standings after the opening 2 rounds. With the win last time out at Kyalami, Danila Cherepenin is now holding on to the championship lead by only 1 point in the McLaren 720S GT3 ahead of Luke Whitehead. Luke Ripper Whitehead, as he's known in full, the Porsche 911 GT3R driver, putting in 2 very strong performances over the opening 2 rounds, and that means that he's on 131 points in second place and only 1 point off of the top of the summit right now. And he's been our most consistent performer, 2 back-to-back podiums. Will he make it 3 out of 3 tonight, or could we even see a win from Whitehead? And of course, we've had 2 winners in 2 different races, with the absence of George Boothby last time out, having won at Suzuka. His absence being, of course, due to welcoming his first-born offspring, and that's fantastic news for George Boothby. And we're hearing that mother and child are all in good health, and we are potentially expecting him to return today. But returning to our standings here in the top 10, we can see Oleg Zabolov there in P3 at this point. The AMR V8 Vantage drive putting in a good performance at Kyalami and currently joint on 112 points, but ahead on result countback compared to the Dutchman Tinko van der Velde. And Tinko van der Velde, of course, being a very strong contender, and we saw that at Kyalami with his brilliant multi-lap battle with Vesfield, and Tinko van der Velde in the end getting the upper hand, but it took a very long time, and you do have to wonder whether van der Velde was going to be our outside winner at Kyalami until Field put pay to that otherwise. Completing our top 5, Matteo Morano there, the SPQR driver in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo, putting in a solid performance and on 106 points completing our top 5, and we are starting to see our top 5 make the break away from the rest of the field, although we shouldn't discount the likes of Raymond Mooney, Harry Phillips, Konstantin Soldatov, Dylan Tan and also Vesfield completing our top 10. All 5 of those drivers putting in strong performances, and particularly the bounce back of both Raymond Mooney and Harry Phillips in round number 2 at Kyalami, something to be respected and commended. And it was the case that Harry Phillips in the Bentley in particular, after a dismal day at Suzuka, really turned it around at Kyalami, and will he be able to continue that upward trend? Outside of our top 10, we can see Ivan Fornes there in P11 right now, and the V8 Vantage driver will be looking to try and find his way into the top 10 tonight on 78 points, only 2 points ahead of Christian and Embrini, another Aston Martin driver. Indeed, the Aston Martin drivers getting in middle ground performances typically, and none more so than Andres Mesa, of course, in P14, the distinct GG driver and our championship winner from Season 2 of the European GT3 Series on 74 points right now, after an opening 2 rounds which have been rather difficult, but at the same time, Mesa picking up that podium in the opening round, and in the end it did not go his way in round number 2. Can he come back to form tonight at Bathurst? Going further down, we can see there Marcus Fox in P17, and Marcus Fox having middle ground performances as well over the opening 2 races, and a difficult time at Kyalami. Can the Porsche driver find his way back up the field? We know the Austrian very capable when he needs to protect the tyres on the car. Leo Boulay in P18, and one of our faster drivers on paper, but it hasn't worked out for the McLaren 720S driver so far in the standings, with the opening Suzuka round seeing him drop down the field after a good qualifying session, and we saw at Kyalami the struggles continue. Will we see the McLaren driver from Team ITR improve and bounce up the order today? And along those lines, we can also see the SPQR driver there, Mattia Servalone, and also Kevin Gellin, the ITR driver. Both drivers there in the Ferraris, both are looking to get some good points, only separated by 1 point between them, completing our top 20. Outside our top 20 then, we can see Maher Haratojo leading in P21 in the run from P21 to P30, and as we continue to look down those standings there, we can see the retirement, unfortunately, from this series of Harry Spears, the McLaren driver, not able to make it to round number 2, and I believe as a result has been confirmed as a retirement from the series, unless I've been misinformed, but the Mercedes driver will be missed after a brilliant performance at Suzuka in the opening round. Luca Filippi in P27, and we can see the army of Ferraris behind him with Dennis DeMarco, Pavel Pushkarev and Michael Pambron, and all those drivers, Mikael Pambron I should say, and all those drivers are looking to get some good points to get themselves into the top 20 of our standings come the checkered flag at the Australian circuit. Outside our top 30, we can see Lee King McGee, unfortunately, retiring from the series as well by the looks of things. And we see Cormac Ryan Meenan, and Ryan Meenan having a very difficult championship so far with only 40 points to his name. And he has been involved in a number of incidents which were not necessarily his fault, but it has been the case. He has been at the centre of a number of incidents, and as a result now will be looking to try and have an incident this race tonight and just get some more points on the board. But still, it's those cases. You may start off with a bit of a poor performance at the start of the season, but he can, of course, bounce back. And both him and his brother, Killian Ryan Meenan, both looking to get some good points on the board, with Killian there down in P38. Meanwhile, looking outside of the two brothers, we can see Mike Crute, who will not be joining us tonight in P33 on 37 points. Unfortunately, due to illness, we were informed at this morning that Crute not able to make it to the circuit, but we hope to see the Briton returning as of round number 4 at Laguna Seca. And as we continue to look down there, Sanjin Bilic in P36, the Bentley Continental driver, with a lot to do going into tonight, and Walter Lux there completing our top 40 with a difficult season so far. After the switch to Ferrari was looking to bring hope, it has not been a successful switch so far. Can he turn it around here today? Meanwhile, completing our standings then, we can see Chris Zoiga there in P41. Remembering that Zoiga was not able to take part at Suzuka due to technical issues with the Porsche. They weren't able to get it out of the garage for qualifying or the race, and so the Swiss had to stay in the pit box. Indeed, just watch as his fellow countrymen in the form of Vesfield, and indeed the rest of the field took to the circuit at Suzuka. And last time out, Kyalami getting a good 30 points on the board and getting himself up to the top end of what is the run into the top 40, with Andreas Sorensen, Andrew Jacqueline, and Nestor Majir and Artem Abakumov completing down to P45, and then we can see the retirement from the series of Trond Ervlin there in P46. We'll be missing the Mercedes driver tonight. Emil Blaine in P47 with a difficult start to his season. Alex Kopsov in P48. We have the arrival tonight of Darren King, known as Dow King out on circuit. Darren King will be joining us. He is a newcomer tonight, and I believe he's quite a famous internet personality as well, unless I'm very much mistaken. We look forward to seeing the Briton taken to the circuit in the Jota McLaren 720S, and then Alexei Yujigov there down in P50, and at this point not scoring any points on the table. Now, as for our circuit, we are here at the Mount Panorama Motor Racing Circuit in Bathurst, New South Wales, Australia. A circuit which is known for its tricky nature, known for its 23 corners, but most importantly, the mountain, the run up and down the mountain, where the run up the mountain starts with Hell Corner at turn number 1 and concludes by the time you get to the cut-in at turn number 4. And then you have the mountain section, which runs all the way from Griffin's Mount in the run through 5 into 6, all the way to its conclusion at what is the Dipper at turn number 1. Turn number 13, 14 I should say, and Forest Elbow there being at turn number 18. Indeed, a very tricky circuit. But it's not over then when you come down the mountain, because you've got the long run down the Conrod Straight to complete the lap through the chase and into Murray's Corner. And indeed, as this image provided to us by Will Pittinger from Wikipedia.org, we're very grateful to the circuit map, of course. It is a fantastic circuit, a very tricky circuit, and even in dry conditions alone, a circuit which will prove to be a major change for our drivers. But in the wet, you can imagine that difficulty is only amplified by a magnitude of a massive margin. Now, as for our rules, we'll be staying with the same rule set as we have throughout the series so far, minus the rules that we'll be hearing in the driver's briefing, which get added on based on each individual round. These are not major changes to the rules, but things such as pit entry, pit exit, and things that you commonly hear in a driver's briefing in real-world racing. But here's our general rule set as if it was defined by the FIA, or in this case, it is the NXTGEN IA, we could call it. And as we can see here, the balance of performance, the BOP used for all cars featured in this series, is the base 2019 variant, and there are 2 mandatory pit stops which will require 1 litre of fuel to go in the car over the course of the pit stops, and changing tyres is optional, so our drivers, if they're daring enough, can go to the end on a single set of tyres from start to finish. And there is no defined pit window. Drivers may choose when to pit, and we saw at Kyalami a lot of drivers take their first stop early on within the opening 30 minutes, and then it was the case that final stop came right towards the end in the final 10 minutes. Will we see that spread again? Well, we are only a couple minutes away from the driver's briefing, so we're going to be looking to our live cameras right now, and you can see, ladies and gentlemen, in this final practice session, just how wet and miserable it is at Bathurst right now, with a lot of rain coming down. We've got an increasing amount of rain scheduled in the forecast within the next 10 minutes. Indeed, our drivers will be hoping, they will be praying that the skies clear up, and it is the case that rain starts to disappear away, because right now it is looking as though that rain is here to stay for the entirety of this evening. If that is the case, this is going to be an extremely tricky race, as we see Harry Phillips making his way through turn number 2 right now and up into the cutting through turn 3 and 4, as we are waiting for the driver's briefing to get underway very shortly, and well, we will be seeing very soon what is going to happen over the course of qualifying, as that driver's briefing is due to occur within the next minute. We'll be getting into the driver's briefing room very shortly to listen in, but whilst we are waiting here, our P2 man, the championship, Luke Whitehead, the Briton, as he makes his way through Forest Elbow here, down through turn number 18. Will this be his opportunity to take a win in the 3rd attempt, or will it be the case it's another podium, 3 out of 3 on the podium? We'll have to wait and see, but he has got my bet for being one of the stronger drivers here tonight, and he will be looking to just try and keep his head down and get a strong result. But whilst we are still waiting for our drivers to make their way into the driver's briefing room, in fact, we're going to sneak in there now and just try to listen in as we wait for the lovely tones of Kevin Smith, our chief organiser for this series, to also take us away with that driver's briefing. And I believe as I have snuck into the driver's briefing room here, and we'll just wait. Of course, this is on a virtual Discord server. This is not happening in the real world, although we'd love to do this in the real world. It is the case that I'm not unfortunately shouting into the ears of our drivers, unlike in round number 1. Some of you who were with us for the broadcast in round 1 will remember where accidentally I managed to deafen a couple of drivers, but it is the case that we are just waiting for Kevin Smith to pop into the driver's briefing room right now. Any moment he should be with us, and then we'll be hearing from him as he's just joined the room, and I believe he is shutting the door behind him and now getting ready to give everyone the rules of engagement for tonight. And any moment now, ladies and gentlemen, as we are just waiting for Kevin Smith to finalise his briefing. Here we go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back for round 3 at Kyalami. We are expecting it to be wet for the evening, judging by the weather we've had recently. Also, a couple of things to run over tonight, as we will be having a few changes due to the track at Bathurst and it being wet. We will allow return to garage during qualifying. So if you spin out, just return to garage, not an issue at all. Reason we've decided this is we all know how tight it is, and with it being wet there is chance of a few more mistakes, and we don't want to impede each other's qualifying laps at all where possible. So for the rest of the evening everything will remain the same. The usual 2 pit stops during the race, which you can decide when to take. Tyres are optional. The only difference is you must take 1 litre of fuel minimum for the pit stop to register. There is no in-game chat to be used once qualifying gets underway, during qualifying or the race as well. And pit exit and pit entry, guys. So as you come out the corner down to pit entry, please hold to the left, so anyone not wanting to pit can just go straight on by on the right hand side of the track. And when exiting the pits, can you please obviously stay behind the line until the pit line ends, and hold the left hand line just in case of anyone coming down the straight as you exit in the pits or coming out the final corner. Other than that, guys, I don't believe there's anything else we have to go over this evening. Everything else has been covered during the previous briefs. The report from race 2 will be out shortly. Due to time differences, I haven't been able to catch up with the other stewards. I do apologise for that. And that is it, everyone. You're free to leave the room. Good luck. Any questions, please put them in the general chat and I'll get them answered as soon as possible.
So there was the driver's briefing from Kevin Smith, and I believe we may have a question coming in from Luke Whitehead very shortly. So there's a question about the pit entry ruling, and I believe that is going to be answered very shortly with regards to pit entry and pit exit. So we're just going to wait until we get confirmation of that, ladies and gentlemen, as we now look back to our live pictures, and we are looking at Whitehead's car, of course. And well, you heard there as well from Kevin Smith the fact that return to garage will be allowed during qualifying, so it will not be the case that our drivers are mandated to come into the pits before they can do the return to garage jump to their pit box, and that is due to safety concerns and the very tight nature of Bathurst. Plus also I think the conditions here may have had a slight influence on that, but it is one of those situations where our drivers are going to be permitted to use return to garage. So we will see some drivers park up in qualifying rather than the standard make their way around. We're also hearing confirmation there from Kevin Smith that with regards to pit entry, coming out of the corner for pit entry, hold the line to the left side of the track. So as you come out of the chase, our drivers have been told coming out of the chicane, they must stay to the left to confirm they are coming into the pits. They're not allowed to fight from the right hand side or pull over from the right hand side of the circuit if they are in close contact with another driver. That will most likely get investigated by the stewards. And our stewards tonight, of course, will be Kevin Smith, and he will be joined by some of our colleagues at the Sim Grid. And indeed, we're very grateful to have the Sim Grid with us, helping us out in conducting our live stewarding and our post-race stewarding, and it is brilliant to have them aboard as always, as we are now only moments away from going racing. Indeed, it's anyone's bet or anyone's guess as to how this is all going to play out, as right now, after the final practice session, it is Danila Cherepenin who is currently our overall fastest driver, it would seem, from this final practice on a 209.467, 3.5 tenths faster than the Spaniard, the fast charging Spaniard, of course, of Andres Mesa, who will be looking tonight to try and get himself right back into that top 5 after a difficult day at Kyalami. And of course, today we are at Bathurst, and it is one of those situations where this circuit can prove to be incredibly difficult. As we do get the jump, then, ladies and gentlemen, we get the jump. It is time to go qualifying. 15 minutes. Who's going to be on pole? That's the big question. And now we're about to find the answer. As we check in with you guys and girls in the chat, and we can see in the Facebook chat there, Jordan Snow saying, "Is this game available for Xbox as well as PlayStation and PC?" It is indeed, Jordan. Although you may want to wait until it comes out on Xbox Series X, I believe. Don't quote me on the names of the consoles. I get a little bit confused by the Xbox consoles because there will be a major release coming out on the Xbox in February 2022 in the latest Xbox consoles, which will essentially bring Assetto Corsa Competition on the console up to the PC version. At the moment they are disparate, of course, whereby the console versions are one major update behind. They're on version 1.7 versus what is the PC on version 1.8. But as of February 2022, all the next gen consoles will be brought up to the latest version and match the PC version. Magia Nesta, meanwhile, in the Twitch chat saying that he's feeling pretty wet and miserable. Well, sorry, wet and miserable pretty much describes the circuit, and he hopes everything is well with us in the commentary box. It is indeed. And I did have the chance to catch up with Nesta Magia earlier on in the build-up as he was making his way towards the car, and we're just going to try and find him out on circuit. And here he is, in fact, just making his way very gently out the pit lane right now. And the Rasket Racing driver, the Ectemo Rasket Racing driver, was saying to me in the build-up to tonight that he's recently moved house, so he hasn't had too much time to practice, but he did get some practice in on dry conditions at Bathurst. Well, driving here in the dry is a major challenge in itself, as we said earlier. Driving here in the wet is an even bigger challenge, but it was the case that for Magia, he does love this track and the mental challenge it gives. He's done endurance racing here on Gran Turismo Sport, and as a result he expects to just try and keep it out of the walls and gain some positions over the course of the race. And indeed, Magia, one of our improving drivers, he was one of our rookies in the European GT3 Championship Season 2, and he's building up that experience. We do have some rookies racing around on the circuit, and it's of course a major opportunity for them just to be able to get some experience in racing in a very high class league. And indeed, speaking of high class drivers, right now you can see that Dylan Tan making his way on down here, down towards what is turn 23 Murray's Corner, and we're going to ride on board with the Ferrari driver as he takes us around for a lap of the Australian circuit. So coming across that timing line then to go onto his opening flying lap, he goes into turn 1, Hell's Corner here, braking at the 75 metre mark, and as he turns in, nice and smooth on the apex before running wide there and keeping the throttle down as he charges up the mountain straight now towards turn number 2. Building all the way up through the gears here, one by one. It feels like it goes on for an eternity this straight, with the fact it's also a change in altitude. And as he makes his way up, he heads towards turn number 2, getting ready to brake at the 100 metre board. He goes a bit beyond it, braking at about 80 metres with the slip road on the left hand side, and turns on through turn 2, having to be sensitive on the throttle before now charging up towards turn number 3. Into the cutting he makes it then, through turn 3, lifting off the throttle before braking hard into turn 4. The cutting, a tight corner coming all the way down through the gears before balancing the throttle and settling the car through the double right-hander at turn 5 and then turn 6 here before he switches over the blind apex here into the left-hander at turn 7, and now it's a triple header of left-handers. Turn 8 firstly as he comes through flat out, then turn 9, a brief lift of the throttle before now making his way into turn number 10, and as he makes his way from the Kyalami Park corner here and to balance the throttle, make sure the car doesn't go wayward up onto the exit curb, he now goes over Skyline, down through turns 11, 12, 13 and 14, away as he comes through 13 and into 14, into the dipper before snapping the steering wheel to the right hand side to go through 15, and then into the left hander at 16 here before coming through the right hand kinker 17 and braking into Forest Elbow here, and as he gradually just balances the weight of the car on the nose and exits a very nice transition there back onto the throttle, he now comes through the left hand kinker 19 onto the Conrod straight here, the longest straight on the circuit and the infamous straight, because this is where we expect most of the overtakes to occur today as he comes charging on down towards the chase. He's got to go through the right hand kinker turn number 20 first, and he'll be heading up to an excess of 160 miles an hour here as he puts it into the right hander and now gets ready to go on the heavy braking into what is the chase chicane into turn 21, balancing the car, and as he gets back on the throttle immediately just clipping the curbs and now exits through 22 and comes down to the braking zone for turn 23. Pit entry on the left hand side there, but he's going to carry on and braking at approximately 75 metres into this final corner. He comes through the final corner to complete his opening qualifying lap, and what's it going to be for Dylan Tan as he crosses the line here, the Turkish driver from Legion of Racers? It is going to be from him a 2:11.2. Well, to be fair to him, it was a very smooth lap. Perhaps it wasn't the fastest, but it looked a very smooth lap, and I think that's going to do Dylan Tan very well in the race if he can put smooth laps like that in time and time again. But but Cherepenin right now setting that provisional pole time of a 209.5, I should say. But meanwhile, a fellow McLaren driver taking the fight to him, and you can see it's the Intruder Racing Team driver, only 3 tenths off, and that is Leo Boulet as he makes his way all the way up to turn number 2. And our newcomer, Dow King there, currently in the Jota McLaren, well, he's only 4 tenths off that provisional pole time as well, as we see a lot of drivers now coming on through. And I do think at this point, it's a case of everybody feeling out the circuit here with the fact that within this qualifying session, we're expecting the rain to remain consistent for the most part of the remaining 10 minutes, although we do have some heavier rain coming towards the end of the session based on the radar. So I think some of our drivers right now will be thinking about getting in their best possible laps within the next 5 to 7 minutes, as they can't really afford to be trying to get those laps in if the rain increases and this circuit gets only more slippery. But meanwhile, further down the field, I can tell you that Andre Jacklin, meanwhile, currently P20 out of all of our qualifying times on what was a 2:12.985. He moves down to P21 there, and Jacklin doing a good job right now as a Slovenian from Food Point Racing, just keeping his head down. And we do know the Aston Martin can be quite the wild beast in the wet, but at the same time, once tamed, it can be a very collected car as he makes his way on through in towards McPhillamy Park very shortly, coming through turn number 9 there, and now into McPhillamy, over the crest there, into the left-hander at turn number 10 as he makes his way on through. Goes a little bit wide of apex there and has to lift off the throttle quite significantly. You could see the body language of the car where it wanted to straight line on. We call that understeer, of course, when it doesn't want to turn into the corner, and he was just feeling that there as he didn't quite get the line he wanted and instead had to lift off the throttle, and that's going to cost him a couple attempts. But meanwhile, as we look from further down the field towards the midfield, we can see that it's Ivan Shematinsky here, the S&P Racing Esport driver in the Bentley, as he makes his way through the cutting here and heads up into turn number 5 and 6 very shortly. And the S&P Racing Esport driver with a great drive at Kyalami last time out. The Bentley driver really coming alive, as we do see a Bentley there moving out of the way for while the M2 Racing Aston Martins, and you can see the Bentley continues to stay out of the way. Shematinsky has to try and navigate around a slower car, but the slower car, to be fair, doing a very good job, and I think that was Bellich there moving out the way at the most opportune moment, and that is a big challenge in itself, as we've got a Cosmos Esports Ferrari there up against the wall, and we've also got one of the S&P, well, that's not one of the S&P, that's a Cortec Aston Martin parked up, and indeed a lot of drivers using that jump to the pit mechanic, which they are allowed to use in this round due to the nature of the circuit, as they all continue to come through. But Shematinsky looking very smooth right now. He's currently P19. Will he be able to improve? That is the question. Will we look from him to a driver further up? And we can see that with him returning to the series tonight, George Boothby here, the Yas Heat driver, already P6 after his opening lap, and the Porsche 911 driver here going to work in order to try and get himself right up towards the front, and qualifying is going to be ever so critical going into the race here, because you want to be right at the front of the pack. You do not want to be in that midfield. I can imagine with that manual double valve rolling start, you do not want to be in that midfield as it makes its way onto the start finish straight and charges into turn number 1, and in the run up the mountain straight into turn number 2, it is going to get very tight if you've qualified somewhere like 15th or 16th. You can imagine there's an instant ahead, as we see Booby there having to literally straight line beyond the run over skyline and going in with too much speed, and the brakes just seizing, and he jumps back to the pit, and Booby just simply carrying too much speed in and having to do some work on the car. You can see it's up on the jacks there. There is something they need to take a look at with those brakes, as meanwhile Christian Nembrini, we can see the Cortec Racing driver here from Italy as he's making his way up the hill towards turn number 2. And as our camera pans round here, we can see Nembrini currently P17 on what is a 2:10.682, a good lap from Nembrini. Will he be able to improve upon that? I reckon there is time to do so. We haven't quite got the increase in rain as of yet. These conditions are relatively stable, but speaking of stability, it is the case that a little bit further back, 2 drivers there trying to keep it stable whilst contesting room into the cutting, and I believe that was Whitehead, and also, unless I'm very much mistaken, it was the Dragon Esports Aston Martin as well, as they were trying to come on through. But meanwhile, as we look from Nembrini to Chris Zoiga here down in P31 right now, the CHF Motorsport driver here having a very difficult time in qualifying, but we do know one thing with Zoiga: if he struggles in qualifying, he normally shines through in the race. He has this knack to be very consistent and get results when they don't appear apparent, as we can see the number 25 driver coming down through Forest Elbow right now, and he's got quite a clear ride. He'll get a distant tow off of the Armentano red Ferrari ahead of him as he clipped the wall there, I believe, on the exit of turn number 18, and that's not going to be a very nice thing for the steering. Already quite sensitive on that Porsche with the 900 degree steering lock. Indeed, any wax to the suspension is only going to make that worse as he comes charging on down here towards what is the chase. He makes his way down, and as he comes down, we can see behind him we have got one of the Ferraris behind. I believe that's one of the SPQR Ferraris Coming into that heavy braking zone here, Zoya just simply trying to keep it as smooth as possible with 5.5 minutes of this qualifying session left to go. So approximately 2 to 3 laps remaining for all of our drivers if they make the most of the time here. But Zoya comes through the left-hander to complete Murray's corner and complete the lap. Is this going to be an improvement from the Porsche driver, or will it be the case he's got to go again as he comes across? We can see one driver moving out of the way, and Zoya does not improve as he parks it up. It is not a successful improvement. But speaking of a driver who is improving meanwhile, or at least looking to prove, that is, as we saw him coming on through very briefly, that was Harry Phillips, but I believe he's just disappeared off camera. But as we look a little bit further up our order, we can see that Cormac Ryan Meenan here, the FFS Racing driver, making his way into turn 23 as we see a Mercedes there waiting to see all the cars come through, and that's very painful to be parked up on the final corner and waiting for the traffic to come through. And the Irishman right now, Cormac, looking to try and get a solid result after what's been 2 difficult rounds so far. And indeed, to be fair to the Ryan Meenan brothers, they've both been putting in good performances in qualifying. It's just been difficulties in the race, and not necessarily their fault, as we said earlier, but it's the case they've been involved in the instance. And with only 5 rounds in this championship, of course, you don't have that many rounds in order to try and come back. But can Ryan Meenan salvage something in this qualifying session? Well, he has so far. He's only a second of that provisional pole time, still held by Danila Cherepenin, but albeit that has been improved by half a second now at 209.062. But note there how King already only 3 thousandths off in the time board on the left hand side of your screen, and Andres Mesa only a further 2 tenths off here. It is getting much tighter in qualifying, but now that rain I'm hearing on the radar is about to start increasing right towards the end. So this is really the last ditch attempt for a lot of drivers to try and get in solid qualifying laps here, as we watch Ryan Meenan on the offensive here as he makes his way around and heads up towards McPhillamy Park. And as he comes through, Ryan Meenan really making every corner as wide as possible. He's using the full width of the circuit, and he's right on the limit, I reckon, of what he's able to do in that Ferrari. And it's very impressive to see as he clips the wall there coming over Skyline. And as a result, Ryan Meenan immediately moving out of the way as George Booby tries to take these lap to the line. And we can see here that Ryan Meenan just a little too close to the wall, and that's what happens when you're driving on the limit of Bathurst. One tiny mistake and it's all over on the mountain. As we see Booby coming down now through Forest Elbow here and using the full whip and just missing the wall. I'm not sure how he hasn't taken off his right hand mirror as he makes his way down the Conrad Straight here. Will we see him move up further into the top 10 here? He's quite vulnerable at the moment. He's only got a 10th over Onufriev in P10, and Ryan Meenan and Dylan Tan both in the hunt for a top 10 placement in this qualifying session with 3 minutes to go. George Booby coming down in towards the chicane, the chase right now with 2 minutes 45 to go as he hits that first apex, and as he emerges through turn 22 and heads to the final corner here. It's looking a reasonable lap right now, but will it be enough? That is the big question we have to ask as he comes into the braking zone here. He's got a little bit of traffic ahead of him, which will give him a small tow to the finish line. This could help him out very slightly, and he makes his way across. I think he ran a little bit wide there, but he's crossed the line. He's moved up to P5 with 209.3 precise, and that is a very good lap then. That's going to put him well into the 3rd row, if not a bit further up, if he's able to do another lap like that but improve a bit more. He's got a lot of traffic now as he makes his way onto another flying lap, but that traffic seems to be moving out the way. As we can see just ahead of him, there's Phil there, the Intruder Racing Team driver from Switzerland in his own Porsche 911, starting to make a campaign for one more lap. He's going to have one more after this, but I'm not sure if he's left enough time as that rain is continuing to intensify, and he comes out of turn number 2, and you can see the spray coming up there where that rain profile is continuing to increase, and this is making it all the more difficult. And with the traffic he's got ahead of him, I can only imagine. We'll give you an idea, ladies and gentlemen. Let's jump on board with him and you'll see what he's having to deal with. This is from essentially the dashboard perspective. This is what the driver's got to try and look through as he navigates through the mountain. And you can see ahead of him right now the Armantino red Ferrari really struggling to nail it as we've got a yellow flag ahead, and as he makes his way up towards McPhillamy Park here, we run on board with Field for the rest of the lap, and see that Ferrari just drifts wide and stays out the way. Here is Field, now makes his way into Skyline and coming down the gears gently here, trying to stabilise that rear all the way through the descent into the dipper. But you can see how the car wants to snake with the standing water, plus also the fact that engine at weight being towards the rear of the car. And as he now makes his way down to Forest Elbow, he'll want to get as tight to the apex as he can, and he just about manages it as he stamps on the throttle. And I do not know how he does not clip that wall. I tell you, there must be at least a millimetre's worth of space, even less, between himself and the wall in the exit Forest Elbow. But now he comes charging down towards what is the chase, and here there that he hit the rev limiter, and that's going to cost him time in the rundown as he makes his way all the way down towards the chicane here. And I think Phil just simply missing out on an upshift there, and as he comes into that braking zone now, will he be able to recover it as he comes through the chicane? Well, regardless, this has been a very determined lap as he makes his way out of 22 and heads up into Murray's corner here one more corner awaits him, and as he comes on through the braking zone here, coming all the way down through the gears, turning the car through and then building up that throttle, he's going to come across the line. What's it going to be? It is going to be a P11. He improves by 3 places, but not enough, as he's now got one more lap available to him, and he's going to try and get it done. As meanwhile, Tinker van der Velde, whilst this has all been happening, the Dutchman has taken provisional pole at 209.025. It's only 300ths faster than Leo Boulay, but you'd have to imagine you see Boulay behind him right now, as both drivers on their final qualifying laps here. Van der Velde putting in some sensational performances I've heard in other leagues and as well as this league. In fact, he was very strong at Kyalami in the RCI league recently, but as he makes his way now down towards the chase, at this point it is the case that Van der Velde doing everything he can in order to be able to take this pole position and sneak it away from the other drivers as he makes his way through. Whitehead in the end has crossed the line to take the checkered flag, and he's only qualified P9, and Whitehead in a difficult qualifying session, but these conditions very tricky at most. And as he comes into the final corner here, Van der Velde, will it be enough? Will we see a 208, or will it be the case that enough is enough? And he's done it. When he comes across the line, he does not improve, but Leo Boulay does, however, and takes provisional pole for the time being with a 208.922. And I think he may have benefited with a little bit of a distance off his fellow McLaren driver there, but he had to put in all the work, did Boulay. And meanwhile, Danila Cherepenin, he's still making his way on through Forest Elbow right now, as we see that Dale King has jumped to the pit, so he will not be improving from P4. Meanwhile, it's the case, what about Andres Mesa? Well, Andres Mesa is going to the pit, and we can see that Killian Ryan Meenan has improved to P5, so Ryan Meenan getting himself right up there, right at the end. But the big question is, can Cherepenin here take pole position back, or will he be resigned to the second row? He's one of our last drivers to complete the qualifying session right now, and as he makes his way through the chase chicane here, it's all about nailing every acceleration zone, about nailing winter braking. In these conditions as well, you make one mistake, even by a millimetre, you're out, and it's amplified massively as he comes through the final corner. Will S&P Racing Esport make it 2 poles in a row, or will it be a different story here? And he does! He takes pole position by 2 tenths almost over Boulay in at 208.747, and surely we're not going to be seeing a response from anyone. Why say that? We've got the ACC driver George Booby here. Will he be able to take pole? He comes across the line, and he in the end is not able to improve from P7. So I do believe, ladies and gentlemen, there is going to be Danila Cherepenin here, who has taken pole position ahead of Leo Boulay. The two of them separated by just under 2 tenths in. That is qualifying, and my goodness, what a close qualifying session in such difficult conditions. But Cherepenin is your pole sitter for the feature race as we now get ready to go racing.
Conditions are wet. We have some slippery curves, and also watch out for your braking distance.
Well, with our qualifying session complete, the big story, of course, is this shootout between the 2 McLaren drivers lining up on that front row. Indeed, it is a McLaren lockout for the front 2 rows, and we should not discount the fact that Dale King, on his debut in this series, taking P4 in the end. As we look on board with the driver right now, the Briton, I think he's going to be very pleased with this and feeling as though he's got a good shot here at a top 5, if not a chance at a podium. But of course, for King, it's about now getting that good start, and will he be able to take a good start and then convert it into that prized result? Or will we see the likes of Killian Ryan Meenan, for example, who we look on board right now, the FFS Racing driver from Ireland here? And it is the case that Ryan Meenan, after 2 difficult days at the office in the previous 2 rounds, he will now be looking at this as the prized opportunity. If he can stay out of trouble for the opening 10 to 15 minutes, he will be on course for a great result, and this could be a fantastic one for him. But of course, many drivers will have something to say about that with regards to results. And as we look further down here, starting in P10, Vedsfield, the Swiss driver for the Intruder Racing team. Now, in his mind, of course, at this point, he'll know that his teammate's on that front row, and he will also know that with regards to his other teammate, that's Kevin Gelling. Well, Gelling, by comparison, is quite a way down the order, as I've come to understand it, all the way down in P26. So Vedsfield right now has got to find a way. He won't have the comfort of teammates around him. Instead, he will have to just try and soldier on and keep himself in that top 10 and progress. But as we look to the exterior helicam right now, and we look a bit further down the order, you can see all of our drivers there on the grid. It is the case, we look further down, we can see Harry Phillips there with a reasonable qualifying session for the Bentley driver, the Wild Things Racing driver, qualifying at P18, completing on 9th row. And he is joined, of course, by Luca Filippi being ahead of him P17. And both of those drivers looking to get good results. And we saw Harry Phillips have a great time at Kyalami last time out. He was well up there in terms of the pace by comparison with his experience at Suzuka. But meanwhile, as we look even further down, we can see Christian Krivek here, the Dragons eSport driver who we referred to earlier, little bit, we didn't refer to him by name, but we mentioned that the car having to navigate over the mountain alongside a fellow Aston Martin, I believe, at the time, and it's the case that Krivec has been lined up on P24 when all is said and done at the bottom portion of our 12th row. And will the number 999 driver be able to get himself into the top 20 today? Well, anything is possible, as they say. Now, one driver I did, speaking of Aston Martin drivers, one driver I did have the opportunity to catch up with in the build-ups tonight, and he is starting P39 right at the back of minus Sanjin Belic. But I think, in fact, we have only got in the end what is, as we try to get the camera on the driver, unfortunately we can't, so we're going to be looking in the inboard right now. It's Emil Blaine who lines up last our drivers. Unfortunately, Sanjin Belic not able to get the car out onto the circuit, and as a result, our P40 driver will not be starting this race. That's very unfortunate here. So it's Emil Blaine who starts at the back of the field. But when I caught up to him, he said that at Suzuka, it was a disappointing, at Kyalami, it was a disappointing time for him. No, my apologies, he wasn't at Kyalami, he was at Suzuka. I'm getting all my mix up here with his teammate Sorensen. But it was the case that Suzuka, he had a disappointing race, and then having to miss Kyalami as well was frustrating. And we struggled with qualifying, not able to set a time, so he had to start dead last at Suzuka. And he was so frustrated he couldn't find rhythm and just was not able to settle into the race. So tonight, he reckons that it's going to be absolutely bonkers, I tell you, bonkers in his own words, with the weather forecast being one where he's had a lot of concerns about it in terms of the heavy rain, and the most difficult circuit he's expecting to race on in this series, it's going to be a race of attrition. And personally, he feels as though, whilst he's not got the greatest of pace with the weather and the combination of circuit, it's going to be one of those situations where he's just going to be conservative, stay out of trouble, stay away from the wall, and keep his head down. He feels there's going to be many positions to get if he just keeps out of trouble, and he said either that or we're all going to die. Well, I think that's perhaps an overstatement, but you can imagine what's going through his head, and indeed the head of a number of drivers here, and it is about controlling those nerves, those race nerves. And indeed another driver who had the chance to catch up with was Kevin Gelling, starting P26, and what he was saying to me into the build-up to tonight's race is that he's just going to try and stay away from the wall throughout the whole race and stay away from crashes, because he has been involved in some incidents in the opening 2 rounds, and it has been the case the Intruder Racing Team driver here, he's got a lot of pace under his belt, he's just not been able to deploy, and he really does come alive typically in the races compared to qualifying. Starting P26 tonight, I think it's going to be a difficult challenge for him, but the Ferrari driver will try to get it done. And with regards to his championship so far, he's had 2 disappointing qualifying sessions, with Suzuka starting P35 and ended up P20, and at Kyalami starting P22 and going back to 10th place, but he's in the end he only finished P19 due to incidents. Well, he'll be looking to try and get a good performance tonight, as meanwhile we look to the front of the field, and it is time for our formation lap to kick off, and it'll be Danila Cherepenin who takes us away from pole position as all of our drivers make the way off the line. Now, of course, as we look to the chat in the meantime here, and we can see NXTGEN Ultra in the YouTube chat, this is going to be a tricky race tonight, which I'm sure will test everyone with these conditions. Oh, most definitely Ultra. And we can see Governor ITR there in the Twitch chat, throwing up the ITR logos, cheering on his teammates. And we also see Iron Duck 92 there in the Twitch chat and saying hello. And we say hello to you, Iron Duck. Indeed, it's great to see so many of you tuning in tonight. And do feel free to let me know in the chat if you do have access to a keyboard and the chat. Do not be shy. Feel free to say hi and let me know who you are putting your bets on tonight to do well, or who you're cheering on at least, or what you're expecting to happen over the opening laps. I personally, I'm going to put my money on it is going to be very close between our top four drivers, all in McLarens of course, but keep an eye on Leo Boulet. It's starting at P2, because I can tell you one thing right now, ladies and gentlemen, this man right here is absolutely chomping at the bit to get a good result. He's missed out twice now on a potential podium, and he will not want to miss out a 3rd time, and we know the ITR driver is a very fast driver when he's got it spot on. But as he makes it up the hill now, we can see everyone just snaking their way up towards what is turns 3 and 4 into the cutting, just very gently at this time. It's going to be one of those situations where those nerves now will be at an absolute peak, as we see Boulet into the wall there already, and surely not a mistake at the start of the formation lap here. And as he tries to push on right now, I think it might be the case that he's just simply not got the temperature in the tyres, and this formation lap as well, very tricky, as we hear that Oleg Zabolo Sokolov there has jumped to the pits, and we may have had another retirement. I'm not 100% sure what's happened here, ladies and gentlemen. As soon as I get any information, I will let you know. But I believe Zolobov has jumped to the pits, and they may have issue with the car, and it may not be able to get back out in time. And if so, that is a disaster, as we have lost another driver. And well, we continue to go around for this formation as we look at Chris Zoyger right now, who starts P28. And what can he do from here? Well, I think it's going to be about keeping his head down, starting that position, and ahead of him, Mattia Vaca here in the Bentley, the Team Bowlers eSport driver. We know that Vaca can be quite strong in terms of midfield pace. Will he be able to pull off something special today, or will he be outside the top 20? We'll be targeting getting into that top 20, I'm sure, as he makes his way now into McPhillamy Park. And as he comes on through, we can also see there the Twitch chat saying that it looks like he's tuned in just in time. You have indeed. And we can see Ironed Up there saying, is Mike in the race today? That's a reference to Mike Crew. Unfortunately not Ironed Up. Mike Crew not able to take part for the SAS racing team, the Slow and Steady racing team, due to illness, but we're hoping to have him back in a week's time for Laguna Seca. We can also see Limmenberg Oliveria saying in the YouTube chat, this will be fun. Indeed it will. And we can see MJK or MJK8 I should say, saying in the YouTube chat, Bentley is a mess in these conditions. Harry Phillips is wringing the neck and still can't get the pace. And indeed it is going to be difficult as we look to the Wild Things racing driver here as he makes his way down through turn number 19 and heads onto the Conrad Straight. And I think for Phillips it's all about damage limitation if it's the case that Bentley not too strong. But to be fair, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, he is our leading Bentley in terms of qualifying, and that's a major achievement in and of itself. And indeed Phillips at this point will want to just be the #1 Bentley come the checkered flag tonight. But meanwhile, we look from our midfield towards the front now, and as all of our drivers continue to stack their way down towards the chase here, now we start to get ready for the formation of the double file rolling start as Cherepenin takes us on down, and we can see our drivers just getting themselves set up, trying to get some temperature into those tyres now. It's critical at this point, and they'll want to bunch up, of course, so that way the field behind doesn't gain by having those stronger temperatures as they make their way out of the chase. And now we get ready to go racing. It'll be Danila Cherepenin who takes us away from pole. And it's lights out and away we go for round number 3 at Bathurst. As we see Cherepenin immediately having to go on the defensive here as they come down to turn 1 behind. Tinko van der Velde tries to look for a way through, but he can't find it. Further back there we can see we've got the M2 competition driver Vasily Anufriev trying to get the move around the outside of Whitehead, but Whitehead in the end having to back out as further back we are hearing that Cormac Ryan Meenan on the offensive versus what is Soldatov there, but in the end Soldatov pulling away, and we continue to go even further back down the order. Everybody navigating safely through the opening corner this time as we see Mattia Vaca here being boxed in. As we can see there, it's Chris Zoyger then making the move as they make their way up the mountain. We look towards our leaders meanwhile, and I believe it is the case that Cherepenin making the breakaway here as we look to the lower cameras. Indeed, we've got a number of drivers. I think there may have been an incident at what was turn number 2. We will try and figure out what's happened very shortly for you, ladies and gentlemen, as our timing screens are just being updated right now. As meanwhile, a bit further back, we can see there has been a cluster in the drivers. Harry Phillips has dropped a number of places by the looks of things as everything settles down. I think there was a driver sideways at turn 2, but it hasn't caused too much damage. We'll try and figure out what's happened very shortly, but right now as they all continue to go racing across the mountain, it's not been overly eventful at the start of the race. Everybody very cautious, which is sensible of course, and we can see Phillips just trying to find a way past DeMarco as they make their way over Skyline here for the first time of asking and roll down into the dipper. But meanwhile Dennis DeMarco here in P19 just trying to hold firm and keep the Cosmos, the Team Vallis eSport machine I should say, in a straight line as he makes his way on down here. And as they come through, then in fact between the Phillips, I believe that is a Selly between the two of them as they make their way through Forest Elbow. But meanwhile it is the case that Leo Boulay has jumped to the pits and something has gone wrong for the Intruder Racing team driver, as that means Cherepenin is our leader right now. I think it was Boulay was one of our drivers who'd gone sideways, but meanwhile we can see Dow King here already on the offensive as we jump on board with a McLaren driver. He's looking for that potential move versus Tinko van der Velde, and as he goes a little bit on to the bow too early there, coming through turn 21 as he comes charging down towards turn 23 right now. It is the case that King has to back off for the time being and wait for another opportunity as they make their way through the final corner for the first time. So as they come around to complete the opening lap, it's Danila Cherepenin leading by 1.7 seconds ahead of Tinko van der Velde in P2, then Dow King in P3, Ryan Meenan, killing Ryan Meenan in P4, followed by Andres Mason in P5, Vasily Anufriev in P6, followed by Luke Whitehead in P7. Then we've got Christian Nembrini in P8 as they all make their way through turn number 1. Then George Boothby has gone into the pits immediately. The Yas Heat driver in. I'm wondering if there's damage to the car, but he's in to the pits, which promotes Konstantin Soldatov to P9. Then we've got Cormac Ryan Meenan in P10, completing our top 10. Behind them, Dylan Tan in P12, Matteo Morano in P13, and then we've got Vedsfield into the pit as well. So a number of drivers picking up some form of damage here as Morano under pressure from what is the Bentley driver Shematinsky behind. And as they make their way through turn 2 and now up towards 3, it is the case that we can see Morano really having to work and do everything he can as he makes his way on through into the cutting. You can see that Bentley just looking so large in the rearview mirror. Unfortunately for us, we're riding on the roof of Morano's car as they make their way through turn number 5 here, but you can imagine just how much Shematinsky would love to get ahead as the places are updated now. Morano in P12 with the pit stops, those early pit stops, and as they come charging through turn at number 8 here and crest the ridge and head down in towards turn at number 10 into McPhillamy. They come soon. It is the case right now as they do come through McPhillamy here that Morano is safe for the time being as the Bentley driver Shematinsky just waits for that opportunity, but it's a long way until they get onto Conrad as they come down through the dipper, and as they do so you can see just how close they run to the wall here. Now both drivers right on the limit of what's possible, and this is only lap 2 of the 1.5 hour race as they come into that braking zone, and Shematinsky all over the back of Morano as they now come out the corner, and as they emerge here, this is where Shematinsky can look for that move as we ride on board here with the Bentley driver. Of course, the challenge of the Bentley is it hasn't got as much straight line speed as that Ferrari typically when they're running equal setups. As they come charging down towards the chase, he's going to look for it here as Shematinsky. He's going to be made to try and go round, but in the end he instead waits. He's going to be patient for it. Is he going to send it to the inside? He considers it, but in the end he decides not to. He just stays very close. Indeed, Shematinsky putting a lot of pressure on as meanwhile we look up towards our leader who is now leading by 3 seconds. Cherepenin here just making the breakaway early on as we can see Van der Velde under pressure from King. Now I'm wondering where Cherepenin here has decided to go for low fuel at the start, because of course there are 2 pit stops and that can give him the opportunity to effectively go for what is an early charge and then break away from the field, then have the pit stop and try to do that fashion. Alternatively, some drivers here may be running a lot of fuel come the start of the race, such as Tinko van der Velde may be running max fuel for example right now and looking to hold on to track position, given the fact it's so difficult to overtake here unless it's on the straights. If Van der Velde's got the car set in a frame of mind whereby he's able to pull out enough of a gap on the straights and then be reeled in on the mountain, he's going to be safe there even if he's got a lot of fuel, and that is the big conundrum that all of our drivers will have to try and manage. As meanwhile chasing after Whitehead's gained a number of places already. He's up to P7. We can see Christian Nembrini here, the Cortec Racing driver, just trying to stay as close as possible to the Porsche ahead of him, as we see behind Ryan Meenan. That's Cormac Ryan Meenan in P10 having a good start to this race so far as they come roaring on through, and as they make their way now through turn number 7 and charge through the triple left-hand sequence that culminates in McPhillamy Park. At this point you can see that it's the case that Embrini does have the M2 competition machine as Soldatov behind, and Soldatov is not going to be waiting that long if he feels as though he can get on through, because he can see ahead of him Anufriev in P6 making moves as well as they all come snaking through in towards the dipper once again here, and as they come on down you can see it's the case that Embrini really having to fight the nose of that Aston Martin. Oh goodness me, and Cormac Ryan Meenan, they're almost losing the rear end on the exit of the dipper as they come into Forest Elbow here, and the FSS driver here I think will be saying a few swear words, much like in perhaps the abbreviation that we sometimes use on the internet, FFS, as he makes his way down through turn number 19 and heads on to the chase here. But Ryan Meenan right on the limit as he heads down towards the chase chicane once again, and as he makes his way on down at this point we can see that Whitehead under huge pressure here from what is Nembrini as they come through. The camera spins round here, and it is the situation when Nembrini looks for it, but the driver of Whitehead not feeling the pressure too heavily right now. He's holding firm and making sure not to lose out as he makes his way down towards turn at number 23 into Murray's corner, and he continues to hold position as they come through the left-hander. But as they make their way onto another lap here further down, I can tell you that Benjamin Asili has managed to get himself into P6. Oh goodness me, and there's contact with Harry Phillips there as he looked for the move, and I think that contact just simply for not respecting the width of the two cars, and Harry Phillips has now dropped further down as the Cosmos Racing Team driver there, the Frenchman, moves up a position. But I do wonder if the stewards are going to be taking a look at that one. I believe they're already at work with regard to taking a look at what's happening. As you can see, Phillips really struggling now with regards to getting that car back up to speed, and it's a little tap. As you can see, Phillips now trying to come on through, and as they make their way up towards turn number 2, it's going to be a drag race between the Ferrari and the Bentley driver, and Phillips on the offensive as he makes his way over the crest of the ridge into the braking zone for 2, and he's going to be able to hold this position right now. But Phillips will be rattled a little bit, but there's one thing we know about the Wild Things Racing driver is he'll only release his wild animal when it's time to strike. And as he makes his way up into turn 3, a very friendly driver down in the garage, but indeed Phillips behind the wheel, when he sees the prize he'll go for it, and he will definitely now see the prize to chase him back after the drivers ahead of him as he makes his way through turns 4, 5 and 6 in rapid fashion, and now heads over a mountain once again. But meanwhile, further down the order, I can tell you that Walter Lux with a relatively quiet start, and I do believe what we're hearing in our ear right now is that the incident at the start of the race into turn 2 did involve Lux and also Krivich at one point, and I believe the car we briefly saw in the camera was the Dragons eSport Aston Martin had been turned sideways, unless I'm very much mistaken. That's what I'm hearing from the trackside marshals, but we're waiting for confirmation from our stewards. I'm sure we'll get that confirmation as we have had the retirement of Leo Boulay, I'm sorry to report, and Boulay just parked in the pits right now, and it is the case the Intruder Racing Team driver, they're not getting that car running again. That is very unfortunate, and as a result we have lost out on a McLaren driver who we thought and we tipped to be very rapid here today as they make their way down the chase, down the common straight towards the chase once again here. We're not even 9 minutes in and already this race has kicked up some surprises and also a little bit of drama as they now make their way through the chicane and head down towards the end of a lap and come to the end of lap number 4. Now as our drivers make their way down, you can see Ryan Meanan, they're just taking a little bit of a peek there on Soldatov. He's not really close enough to make the adventure or even dare risk a late lunge, but it is the case. I think Ryan Meanan just trying to get the message through at this point that he would like to try and take that position if he can, as our drivers make their way through the corners once again here, and as they come roaring through the left hand at turn number 1 and head up towards turn 2 again, you can see it's the situation right now. We're calling Ryan Meanan under that pressure as he comes up the hill, and as they make their way all the way through. Well, in fact, he's not under pressure, he's leading in this pressure stakes. But up ahead of them, I think they've already got some traffic up the road, and that ahead, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, is the other Ryan Meanan, brother of what is Killian, who's just made the move on Andres Mesa. So while that was going on, he's got ahead of Andres Mesa. In fact, Mesa losing 2 positions there as Onufriev has come through as well, and as they make their way through turn at number 5 right now, we almost missed it, but Andres Mesa having a difficult moment. He's lost out considerably as we ride on board here with the Aston Martin driver, the Distinct GG driver, and the Spaniard. Well, he rarely makes mistakes, but when he does, it costs him, and it has cost him dearly here, as now Ryan Meanan and Onufriev have gained the places at the expense of the Spaniard as they make their way through Mavillamy Park once again here, and it's such a challenge for Mesa to follow the M2 competition machine this close. Remember, there are identical machines bar the setups on the car, but it's one thing to catch, it's another thing to pass, as the venerable commentators of age have said. And as he makes his way down in towards turn at number 18 right now, we can see that Mesa just trying to stay close and looking to come back here as he comes out of Forest Elba, and looking how close he is right now. I think it's going to be one of those situations where in an ideal scenario he would catch Onufriev, but Onufriev getting the better pull out the corner here, and I do wonder whether Onufriev has got that Aston Martin set up for a little bit more straight line speed by comparison as they make their way down, because you can see that Andrew's just not closing anywhere near enough. I mean, to be fair, Onufriev does have the toe of Ryan Meanan ahead, but I think this is also in the hands of the fact that it could be Onufriev's running a little bit less downforce by comparison, or it could be an engine map on Andres Mesa car where he's trying to save a bit of extra fuel or just simply balance that throttle map as they make their way down into turn at 23 once again. And we look to those exterior cameras, but looking a bit further up, meanwhile, he's been on the rear of what is Van der Velde for some time, but Dow King are continuing to push on the Jota McLaren driver here as he comes across that timeline to go onto lap number 6. And as they come on through, you can see that Cherepenin here just running away with things. They get now 5.6 seconds, and in terms of lap times right now, the only driver in the 210s, well, the only drivers in the 210s other than our race leader would have to be the drivers of what is Konstantin Soldatov, and also I believe we've got another 210 in the form, unless I'm very much mistaken. In fact, that's the only driver Vasily and Nufri of sports. So the two M2 competition Aston Martins running the 2-minute 10s like our leader. Everybody else 2:11s or lower. And indeed, this does seem to spring the question: are the M2 competition guys running low fuel, low cars at the moment? As we continue to look at Dow King here, trying to put that pressure onto our second place man, Tinker van der Velde, at this point. But of course, with only 10 minutes complete, we now start to enter into that little bit of a grey phase with, oh goodness me, and van der Velde, I was going to say, talking about grey phases there. Well, he's had a brush with the wall. You can see that as there's a drive-through penalty for Cherepenin. So I believe that must have been contact between himself and Boulay. But right now, this will affect him, with Dow King making the move with van der Velde scratch the wall there on the run through turn number 6 into 7. I mean, Dow King is effectively, you would expect, to become your race leader once Cherepenin has taken his drive-through penalty. Morano with a 5-second penalty as well. So our stewards have been hard at work, and the stewarding is now coming in, and we'll give you updates on the stewarding very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, as we can see that Dow King right now just trying to keep it in position and break away. That's the big thing he needs to do right now, with van der Velde, I think, trying to nurse a little bit of damage to the car. Perhaps there's a slight bit of damage to the steering rack here, but Ryan Meenan is starting to build up all over the back of him as they make their way down Conrad. Now, in terms of that drive-through penalty for Cherepenin here, to confirm what it was, it's a drive-through penalty to car number 177 for moving across into what was turn number 2 and making knocking car number 7 off circuit when they were already on the edge of the track. And car number 7, if you're wondering who that is, it is unfortunately Leo Boulay, who's in the pits, and that is why Boulay is out of the race due to the damage picked up from that incident. And Cherepenin with his drive-through, which he has to serve within 3 laps of receipt, as we come to understand it. That is why our two drivers, our two McLarens who started on the front row, they've been at war with one another, and Cherepenin is now going to feel the pain from it, much like the pain felt from Boulay earlier on. As meanwhile, behind all the battling for the lead right now, or the effective lead, we can see it's the case that Luke Whitehead here in a run versus Nembrini, and I think Nembrini's going to have the overspeed here through turn 1 up towards turn 2 as our cameraman tries to get some grease on the camera axle, and as they make their way up towards turn number 2, you can see Whitehead losing 2 places there as the Aston Martin drivers just using that V8 Vantage torque in order to be able to muscle their way past the Porsche. To be fair, the Porsche more of a handling car typically by comparison with the the Porsche more of a handling car compared to the front of that Aston Martin, and we're seeing it being deployed here. Whitehead very strong over the mountain, but as soon as we get onto these long straights, it does look as though the Porsche drivers are just struggling a little bit for outright pace, as we've now got 4 Aston Martins running from P5 to P8, and it's Whitehead in the Porsche, who's a very lonely Porsche until you get down to P14, and Raymond Mooney down in P14 in his Porsche, as we can see here, the sim racing masterclass driver from Scotland, as he makes his way there through turn number 8 into 9. He does have DeMarco behind him in the Ferrari as they make their way over the crest into McPhillamy Park here. And for Raymond Mooney, he's had a very quiet start to his race, but to be fair, we know with Mooney he's a very strategic minded driver. Now, why do we say that? Well, Kyalami, for those of you who watched at Kyalami, you'll remember this. Mooney took his pit stops much earlier than everybody else, got himself out of traffic, and then simply gained a plethora of places on the final stint, whereas everybody else was pitting. He got himself right up to pace, right up to speed, and he gained about, I think it was 8 to 9 places in the end, as we see there DeMarco getting it very wrong on the exit for himself and having to back off before taking the car to the wall there. And DeMarco right now will be feeling that pain in terms of the fact they will have Vasily closing up behind him in P16. But watch out for Mooney. I wonder if he's going to be deploying another one of these rather unique strategies to try and undercut the majority of the field. We'll have to wait and see, as 15 minutes of this race has passed right now, and we've still got plenty of time to go and plenty of strategy on the horizon as our drivers continue to make their way around the circuit at this point in time. But meanwhile, as we see a Luke Whitehead into the pits here. Now, Whitehead coming in, I'm wondering if he's trying to simply give himself some space to the field, or whether they're nursing a problem on that car and they're going to have to do some repair works. He did drop down the field a little bit here, but this might be just his opportunity to get himself out of sequence with the rest of the field and gain some places. Perhaps he's feeling that Porsche, he's going to just gradually drop back regardless, so they need to throw something at this. As Harry Phillips also into the pits, and I think Phillips will be in with some damage on the car to repair, but also this may be an early pit stop for a number of drivers here. here. Now, in terms of the radar, I can tell you that within the next 30 minutes, we are expecting the rainfall to increase even more. This is only going to become a more wet and wild race as time goes on. You can see they're coming out the pits right now. That's Whitehead coming out right towards the front of this pack, at the very head of this pack. That is one of our TUG Racing Esports drivers, and we haven't mentioned the Austrian. That is Rainer Erfenstedt there in the McLaren in P20 right now, and I think he's having quite a fun time of things. I must say, the TUG Racing Esports driver, he always enjoys different conditions here as he makes his way through turn 2, but I think he'll also be sweating a little bit because he'll look at his rear view mirror and think, I've got the P2 guy in the championship now. He's just had a pit stop and he's all over the back of me. Do I fight him or do I simply let him through? I think if you're Erfenstedt at this point, you don't worry about that too much because you're going over the mountain. It's near impossible to overtake here unless you've made a major mistake. Alternatively, it's the case that you've got such an overspeed versus the driver in front of you and they've most likely made a mistake. That's when you'll be able to get it done, but we'll have to wait and see as they come on through. But you can see Whitehead really closing fast. As behind them, we can see it's the case that Yujigov here is up into P22, and the Armentara red driver here having a very difficult qualifying session. Oh, goodness me, and we're going to talk about them. But it's Whitehead who goes round the outside to inside over Skyline there versus Erfenstedt, and Erfenstedt had to be very compliant there. But to be fair to Whitehead, the Briton, that was very brave, and he's got it done. He's up into P20, and I think for Whitehead right now, he sees an opportunity to jump a good amount of the field by simply having made his pit stop and now making that car work as hard as possible as Danila Cherepenin is into the pits, and that means, ladies and gentlemen, on his debut, he's going to take his first lap in the lead of the race, and that is Dow King as he makes his way into turn 1 here, with Cherepenin taking that drive-through penalty for contact with Leo Boulay, which has put Leo Boulay out of the race. So as King now makes his way up the hill, this is going to be a unique experience within this league for him, and the Jota McLaren driver making the breakaway versus Killian Ryan Meenan right now, as we can see that Tinko van der Velde has actually dropped a number of places. And in fact, the McLaren driver, after that instant which saw King take the lead, where simply Van der Velde got it wrong on the exit of turn 7, and as a result, also on the run into turn 7, clipped the inside wall, and as a result, Van der Velde now, as he goes a little bit wide there on the exit of 2, I definitely think that the McLaren driver here nursing an issue with the car and just trying to keep that car together in these conditions. And you can see in the cameras where that rain is continuing to increase here, and I do think we're going to be seeing plenty more moments and upsets before we finally start to see a potential breakaway winner here. Nothing is certain yet, and we're not even 20 minutes in, ladies and gentlemen, so don't close those betting windows just yet. It is going to be one of those situations where I think everybody now trying to settle into a rhythm, but these conditions could get tricky at any time. We can see a dry line forming on the circuit, to be fair, but with that rainfall set to increase, it's only going to make that dry line ever more important to find as our drivers make their way on through the corners and they come down through the dipper once again. But we look from our top 10 to further down into P12 right now, and Ivan Shermatinsky here, he's all over the back of the McLaren Cherepenin as they come through the dipper, and now this is not where Cherepenin wants to be. Now, to be fair, these two drivers, of course, SMP Racing Esport drivers, and the SMP Racing Esport team very cleverly played the teamwork game last time out at Kyalami to make sure that both drivers got maximum points. So want to do that again here. So I think that Shermatinsky may have had it on the radio already. Do not pass your teammate, just simply act as a rear guard until he finds a way past Morano, and then come through with your teammate as you go past the SPQR driver. That's what I reckon they're going to do here, and this will be a great opportunity for Shermatinsky to do some fuel saving behind his teammate, because he won't want to overspeed into the back of his teammate or try and overspeed for a move. Instead, he'll just tuck right in behind. But meanwhile, Morano will have something to say about this, because the SPQR racing driver here will want to hold on to his position as best as he can. And to do so, of course, will net him valuable points and could set him up very well later on in the race. And remember, Cherepenin has still got to take 2 pit stops. That drive-through does not deduct one of his pit stops of the mandatory requirement. So Cherepenin right now needs to find a way past the Ferrari driver if he wants to get himself right back into contention for the midpoint of the top 10, as all of our drivers make their way onto another lap here. And as they do so right now, we take a look a bit further down our order towards what is P30, and it's Marcus Fox right now who has got Zoiga all over the back of him. These two drivers have already pitted, and we are seeing a lot of early pit stops being made by our mid to bottom field drivers. And really the biggest name that took an early pit stop as well as Whitehead was George Boothby, and those guys right now 19th and 20th respectively. And Marcus Fox and also Chris Zoiga here also providing us with examples of going for that early stop. Now, is this an attempt just to simply react to the conditions and also to get a stop out of the way and gain place? Is that what you have to guess? As we see Marcus Fox there, I think there might have been a little bit of contact there with Zoiga, I'm not 100% sure, but Fox box regardless going off, and you can see flashing his lights there, and I think the Austrian was in contact with Zoiga, and Zoiga getting it right under brake, and as you can see Harry Phillips looking for that move. He's not quite close enough as the Wild Sphinx driver as they make their way out of turn 1 and head up towards turn number 2, and they go charging up the hill once more. But meanwhile, further up the road, we can see Mikel Rattel here making his way behind what is the fellow. Well, he's got a Ferrari behind him, I should say. That's Pantera behind him there, as we see the Cosmos Racing Team driver. I think the two Cosmos Racing Team drivers together. Great photo opportunity, of course, for the Cosmos Racing Team. But they'll be wanting points, not photos, at least the drivers, as they make their way through turn number 7 and head into the triple left sequence at 8 through to 10 with McPhillamy at the end of it. And as they come on through at this point, you can see a little bit of a snake of cars now starting to build. At the front of this pack is Alexei Yuzhikov, and we see the Russian here as the camera pans around the Armentero red driver from Russia just simply holding firm right now. And to be fair, a number of the drivers behind him have already made pit stops. He's yet to make a pit stop, and he's not really fighting. He's just simply keeping to his pace and doing everything he can. Now, with regards to that 10-second penalty, for those wondering about Matteo Morano in P10, it's a case of 10-second penalty to him, and this was for contact with car number 81, causing the driver to lose control of the car. And if you're wondering who car number 81 is, well, I can tell you that car number 81, unless I'm very much mistaken, is Ivan Shermatinsky. So that's why Morano has got the 10-second penalty, and it is because of the contact between the two drivers earlier on. But those are the two big stewarding decisions so far. We're waiting for any updates on further stewarding decisions, and our stewards, of course, are watching this race with eyes of a hawk as drivers make their way around to make sure things are fair in the spirit of racing. As meanwhile, Yuzhikov just holds onto the position right now versus Field as they make their way on through down towards turn number 23. And Field here looking, he's teasing up that move. He's teeing it up indeed as they make their way through turn 23 right now, but he's not able to find it at this time. But we saw this from Field at Kyalami in terms of when he was on the defense versus Van der Velde, and he had to find every which way to defend. Now, will he find every which way to make the pass? Well, he's not able to find it into turn 1. He's going to have to wait a little bit longer as the ITR driver as he makes his way out. And now this has got to be the opportunity. As you see in the rear of your picture there, you've got the two Cosmos Racing Team drivers, the two Ferraris of Rattel and Pantera going to war. And meanwhile, we can see Field being made to go around the outside here. This is important for P21, and Field needs to make this pass because he's already made one pit stop, and every lap he spends behind the Ferrari driver is a lap lost in the strategy. And Yuzhikov still holds as we see Field trying to go for the cutback here, but there's just not enough width on the apex of the corner as it is an uphill. And you see Field flashing his lights here, trying to get in the mind of the Ferrari driver, but there's no way through, and he's going to have to spend another lap tucked in behind the Ferrari, at least another run over the mountain as we look from in our midfield towards the front right now. And you can see the Dow King continuing to lead, not by much to be fair, but he is holding on to that lead by 4 tenths of a second as it currently stands as they make their way down Conrad here. And Anuferev continues pursuit, and I think Anuferev at this point with Ryan Meenan just behind him, and you can see Andres Mesa as well in P4, and we do have a top 4 that is starting to break away from the rest of the pursuing pack as Tinker Van der Velde has found his way back up to P5. He's the head as oh goodness me, Dow King has got it very wrong on the exit of the chase chicane. He's now dropped the position to Anuferev here, the Jota McLaren driver, just getting a little bit sideways at turn 21, and I think not settling the car down as we see peeling into the pits there is Cormac Ryan Meenan from P8. So one of the Ryan Meenan brothers deciding to go for the undercut, the lead brothers deciding to stay out on the strategy with the leaders. I think the FFS Racing drivers here could be trying to split the strategies and essentially get themselves ahead of the field by playing to different strategies. As meanwhile, we see Dow King now chasing after Anuferev as they make their way up towards turn 2 once again. And indeed, with a near miss like that, now you've got to get your head back in the game. And when you're in King's position at this point, it's all about thinking, right, that corner's not going to phase me. But talking about things that are going to phase drivers, Tinker Van der Velde will be phased by the fact he does have a Cortec Aston Martin trying to go around the outside to inside here through turn number 2. But it is the case that right now we can see Nembrini just not able to get close enough as they make their way up the hill. Well, I say he's not able to get close enough. He is close enough to reach out and tap the rear wing of that McLaren, but he's not able to get himself fully alongside. And now it's that painful grind over the mountain where you've just got to wait for that opportunity come the end. As we check in with you guys and girls in the chat, and we can see there from Governor ITR talking about Leo Boulet on lap number 1 being taken out, which is very unfortunate there, and the stewarding has been executed as a result of that. I think there might be also some words between the drivers after the race, but I'm I'm sure they'll try and keep it as much as civil as they possibly can. But meanwhile, as we see, Tinko van der Velde holding that P5 the time, and he breaks away a little bit from Nembrini, but this is where Nembrini will fall back. He hasn't quite got the rotation that Aston Martin versus the McLaren ahead of him, but then when we come onto the straights, that's where the roles are reversed, and it is the beast behind that is unleashed as the timid McLaren looks to simply try and hold its ground in the long run down towards the chase, the long run down Conrad. But as they come on through once again, you can see in the rear of that picture Dylan Tan in P8 and staying with the leaders right now. The Ferrari driver, to be fair, the Legion of Racers driver from Turkey, just simply having a quiet race here and keeping to his strengths, which is a quiet but solid performance. And as we're coming towards the end of the first half of now, you can see Andres Mesa going for the move, and as the camera pans round here, we can see it's going to be a situation where Andres Mesa trying to look for that move on the Ferrari driver of Ryan Meany. He's not able to find it as we ride on board here with the Spaniard, and he now sees the target and he's going for it with feverish endeavour as he makes his way down towards turn 23 through Mully's corner. Now where can he get the move on Ryan Meany? And that's the question. Well, I think for him, he's got to look to get it done into turn number 2, because that Aston Martin are very bold in terms of straight line speed, but through the corners, that's where Ryan Meenan is gaining and holding firm. And you can see there Mesa trying to close up as much as possible, under braking into turn 1, going for that aggressive move, and now it's the drag race up the hill. He will have the toe of the Ferrari in front of him as it punches a hole in the air, but he's nowhere near close enough as they come up the hill. And we do believe that Andres Mesa is running quite a bit of downforce on that Aston Martin compared to his peers from M2 competition, so the likes of Soldatov, for example. So it could be the case that Andres Mesa has gone for a bit more of a balanced setup in terms of also making the car handle better over the mountain to give himself a good chance of making moves coming out of Forest Elbow, which is not a bad idea, all things considered. As you can see, he just continues to close up here, and we just continue to listen to the roar of that V8 as he emerges from the cutting once again. As he now has to back off a little bit as they head through the triple left-hand sequence that heads to McPhillamy Park. It's one of those situations right now where Andres Mesa will continue to soldier on, as meanwhile further back Matteo Morano into the pits and serves his 10-second penalty, and this will promote a number of drives up the field, and none more so than the Russian of Pavel Pushkarev, who we haven't talked about too much. You can see behind him right now he does have Raymond Mooney, and Mooney staying with the Ferrari driver, but these two giving one another space out on circuit. They're not pushing one another too hard, both of them running in the 2:12.3s approximately, varying around those laps, albeit their best laps have been 2:11s, but they're both settling on low 2:12s right now, and I think these two have got a little bit of a mutual understanding in terms of let's just run to similar pace, as Moody there decides to go a little bit high on the exit curve at Philamy, and as a result having to settle the car down. But I think with these two running together right now, I think they're going to come to blows later in the race, but it's that quiet ascent, if you will, between the two drives of not to fight. But speaking of fighting, meanwhile, I can tell that Andres Mesa is fighting once again for P3, and he goes round the outside into the Ryan King before the chase chicane, and here's the case. I think Ryan Meenan decided, you know what, it is the case, Macy, you are faster than me right now, I'll give you a lap to have an opportunity to try and pull me up to the back of King and Anuferev. And you can see Mesa just pulling off of the racing line there to try and get some water on those tyres. Into the pits comes, I believe that's Konstantin Soldatov from P7, as we do get, I think that's a little bit of the barrier there as our cameraman's got it a bit wrong, but it is the case as we look away from the pit barrier to Tinko van der Velde in P6. Soldatov in here after 28.5 minutes of race. I think Soldatov is trying to go for an undercut on the rest of the field, and to be fair, he can afford to should he desire to, as meanwhile our race leader Vasily Anuferev just continues on his way right now, and as he makes it out the hill, he's got the back marker there, I believe. And that is the food racing point driver of what is Andre Jacqueline ahead. They're starting to come behind some back markers right now, but it is the case that remembering that those back markers will have to obey the blue flags, but also actually one thing we haven't talked about here, when they come up behind back markers on the mountain, where do you go as a back marker driver? There's not too many places to pull out of the way here, so catching traffic at the wrong time could be absolutely hazardous to one's race, and indeed Anuferev will have that in his mind now that he is starting to see traffic appear in front of him, albeit he's still got a few seconds before he's going to close up enough to it, but Anuferev will be starting to think about that. As you can see, he's getting closer and closer to the back of Jacqueline, as I think there it was the case that we almost just saw King into the wall there, coming up through what was turn number 9 as the camera pans round here, and we can see that King really pushed it to the absolute limit. He clipped the exit curve at 9, and as he makes his way now down through the dipper, it's a situation where Andres Mesa all over the back of the McLaren driver as the rain continues to fall here at the Australian circuit, and we are now 1/3 of the race in. We've got got 60 minutes remaining, and if anything, the risks are only increasing, the rewards get only more tantalising as Dale King now has the pressure of the Aston Martin of Andres Mesa all over his back, breathing down his neck as they come down the Conrod straight here. Now what will King do? Andres Mesa not close enough this time, but he will be where he's going to put that McLaren right in the middle of the road here, and as they make their way down into the right-hander at 20, you can see Mesa all over the back, but it's a bit too late to go for it, is it? Or is he going to look for it? It's going to be very late if he goes for it. He doesn't in the end, but he definitely makes a sign of, look, if I was about an inch closer, I would go for it. As they make their way on the exit of the chicane right now, it's one of those situations where I think for King, he knows it's coming. He's just got to be ready for it. Or does he decide, you know what, I'm not going to defend this because we've got a lot more racing to go, and it wouldn't be worth the time lost right now to the leader, as Anuferev is really starting to open up that lead. And we can see that King just simply now having to think about whether he does go defensive as we ride on board here with the McLaren driver, the Joe McLaren driver, as he makes his way up towards turn number 2. Now, what can he do in this scenario? Well, he can put the car in the middle of the road. It's not the widest of straights here, albeit you can go too wide if one drives on one side and one's on the other. And as they make their way up towards turn number 2, it's the case that Mesa not able to catch up as much as he perhaps like here as they come into the braking zone once again. And these guys settle down into a similar fashion, as meanwhile, further down the order in P15, talking about one driver who wants to try and cut through the field, it's Luke Whitehead right now, and the Briton, who we saw with a daring move over the top of Skyline earlier on. He is trying to close up to the back of Haritojo, but meanwhile a little bit further out the road, Raymond Mooney in P12 right now. Well, he is continuing to chase after push grab here, but the two drivers inseparable right now, still running to that similar pace as they make their way into the second third of the race. And further up the road they will of course have Kevin Gellin, and we haven't really talked much about the Frenchman here as he makes his way through turn number 4, and as he comes out of the cutting here, the Intruder Racing Team driver just keeping his nose down and keeping his head down and getting on with the race. Indeed, right now in the top 10, he's our last driver in the top 10. How far can this take him as he makes his way on around through in towards McPhillamy once again? But meanwhile, a bit further back, we see that Whitehead here, well, he's got past Haritojo, and he's now making his way after Vaka, the next driver, as we're hearing that he passed Haritojo into turn number 2. Didn't quite catch that on camera, but he now makes his way through the signals of corners here, and Whitehead on a mission. He's already made one pit stop, and he will be trying to continue to come through the field here. Has he timed it too early in terms of the pit stop? The fact that he's had so many fights to do, that's only something we will see towards the end. As meanwhile, speaking of fights, we look back to our battle for P2, and it's the case that Dale King and Andres Mesa still at nose to tail. These two are not coming to blows as of yet, but you can imagine that Andres Mesa is now looking for it here as he makes his way out to 22. He's very close. He's the closest he's ever been. He looks on the inside here into 23 into Murray's corner. He's not quite there, almost getting his nose alongside, and Dale King, I think, having to think about, do I turn in and cut off the nose, or am I going to be safe? Well, in the end, Andres Mesa putting our P2 man in a difficult position, and that's going to be an even difficult one as they make their way into the turn 1, and you can see Andres Mesa on the inside. King backs out there on the exit, recognises, I think it's now about the drag race up the hill, and he doesn't want to cost the pair of the drivers more time, just simply tuck back in. They've still got 56 minutes of racing to go here, and it's Andres Mesa now up into P2, Dale King down into P3 as they make their way up into turn number 2 once again. Behind them, Killian Ryminen just watches on in the distance and waits for his opportunity to get involved as well. As a bit further back, I can tell you that Dylan Tam, meanwhile, the Legion of Racers driver here, he's chasing after Tinker van der Velde, and van der Velde is falling backwards to a degree. That last lap from van der Velde, a 2:13.4 versus Tan on a 2:12.7. Now, has van der Velde got a problem, or is it a case he's just made a mistake? We would expect it's most likely a mistake, if anything, as we see the Food Point Racing machine of Andre Jacklin behind these guys. He's a lap down, of course, and Sherman Timsky is a further 6 seconds behind these drivers as they make their way across the mountain once again. And more rain is on its way on our radar. We've had that confirmed by NXTGEN Ultra in the YouTube chat there, as all of our drivers continue to make their way on through. And it's great to see so many of you tuning in, and it looks like you're all enjoying it so far as they make their way around the circuit to our drivers here. 56 minutes still to remain, still plenty of events to happen, I'm sure, in this race, and right now it's all about those critical pit stops. When will we see more of our pit stops come, and this from our leaders, of course, and how will our early stoppers fit into this? Will we be seeing any surprises, drivers that suddenly appear out of nowhere with the strategy working out for them? That will be the big question, of course. And one of our other drivers who had that early pit stop was, well, it was George Boothby. who in P16 right now makes his way down in towards what is the dipper here, and as he comes on free, he's closing up to the back of Soldatov, who also pitted early, and now we're starting to see the crossover between the drivers who took that very early stop and the drivers who decided to pit after 15-20 minutes. And Vubi was one of our drivers who took a very early stop, but ahead of him, Konstantin Soldatov was one of our drivers who decided to pit from effectively what was the lead group after 15-20 minutes. He's not too far up the road, and further down you can see Cormac Ryan Meenan here when he's come out ahead of Vesfield, and now the Ferrari driver has got the pressure with the ITR driver who pitted very early has come up behind him here. And Vesfield, I would say, has gained a bit of time over the course of the race so far, with Ryan Meenan right now really in that position where I think he's got to start thinking about the bigger picture here. Does he fight the Porsche behind him and then try to come back at him later in the race, or does he now start the fight? And this is the problem, because if he does try to go for the fight, as we're hearing more penalties coming in here, and we'll talk more about those in a second, if he does try and fight right now, does it compromise his strategy, or is that what his strategy was all about, trying to stay ahead of Vesfield? As meanwhile we see that Raymond Mooney has got a 10-second penalty here as he pushes after Pushkarev and charges up the hill after the Ferrari driver. Now will he look for the move? He's very close. He's going to try out the inside, and we see Pushkarev not offering a defensive line. I think what Pushkarev's doing, he's going to try and hang it around the outside, but accept the fact that with his opponent having a 10-second penalty which will be applied to his pit stop. In fact, Mooney goes very deep, and as they emerge on the corner there, Pushkarev not having to do really any work to try and hold that one. He just simply found that his opponent went a bit too deep into the corner. I was going to say they'd be letting Mooney go for the simple reason that Mooney will have to spend 10 extra seconds in the pit regardless of what the two do, and you'd expect to come out ahead. When the end, Mooney's going to have to try and tee it up once again here, and that penalty for the number 13 driver. In terms of why he's got a penalty, you ask? Well, for car number 13, it's a hit in the rear of car 95, under braking into the final corner, causing 95 to spin out and lose position. And who is car number 95, you ask? Well, car number 95 is... Give me a brief moment here, ladies and gentlemen. That is Matteo Morano, who's in the pits. And in fact, I believe Morano, we're hearing that they've had to retire the car. Morano, the SPQR driver, one of two SPQR drivers, is out of the race, and that is very unfortunate. And Mooney now making his way down into Forest Elbow here, continuing to chase after Pushkarev as both drivers emerge from the corner. You can see Pushkarev, though, really sliding on exit there from Forest Elbow. And as they make their way down onto Conrad once again, Mooney's going to be getting closer, but I don't think he's going to be close enough this time. We know that the Porsche and the Ferrari quite similar in terms of their handling capabilities, with the Porsche having the advantage, but in turn the Ferrari just having a little bit more straight line grunt. And we can see Mooney closing here with the toe in the long run down towards the chase chicane, but he's not close enough to consider the move as of yet, as they make their way through the chicane once again, this being, on their 17th tour of the circuit. And as they make their way on down here, looking a bit further down the order, there were some more penalties being applied to our drivers. I can tell you that looking further down, it's the case that Marcus Fox and Krivic here, both with penalties. Marcus Fox for a 10-second penalty, Krivic for a 15-second penalty. What's this for, you ask? We'll start with Marcus Fox, the number 67 car. His penalty was for hitting the rear of car 25, resulting in a push to pass. And I do believe car number 25 was Chris Sawyer. And you saw earlier, ladies and gentlemen, we did catch it on camera, Chris Sawyer being pushed a little bit wide off circuit there. And I believe that was Fox who tapped him, and that is what the penalty is for. Meanwhile, we see a Krivic with a 15-second penalty, Christian Krivic behind, and that is for what was causing contact on rejoining to the race in line. Well, no, that is a warning to car number 9. It was the case that for Krivic then, he picked up the penalty in the number 999 car for what was an unsafe rejoin, which caused an incident with car number 22. And car number 22, for your reference books, is, I believe, well, we haven't quite got car number 22 on our list right now, but we will very shortly when all of our numbers are updated. But car number 22 being inconvenienced by Christian Krivic, and as a result, Krivic now having to feel the brunt of the steward's wrath. As meanwhile, we look from Krivic to further up the field, and Vasily Anufriev right now, our lead Aston Martin driver, and indeed our race leader, as he's on his 18th lap, putting in a solid stint here as he makes his way down through towards the chase chicane once again, and with a gap of 6 seconds over Dow King right now, as we see Dow King here holding a position for the time being in the McLaren as the camera pans around. It's a situation where I think Andres Besa just trying to size up the McLaren driver as they make their way out of turn 22 and down towards 23. And remember, we are yet to see our opening set of pit stops from all of our leaders. We've had a number of leaders who have made their stop, stops, and our top driver right now who's made 1 stop was our opening race leader, and that was Danila Cherepenin, who is in P12 right now. But Cherepenin, as we look to the camera here and we can see him, he's just putting in lap after lap, and I can tell you in terms of the current lap times, Cherepenin is not lapping with the leaders. His last lap was a 2:13.2, but I do wonder whether that may have been due to a bit of traffic, alternatively just trying to get the car switched on. Well, he's been out on the circuit for a good couple of laps right now, so I think it may either be it's a case that he came up against traffic or he wasn't able to get the car switched on. He's made mistakes. We see George Boothby in again here as the camera pans on through, and we say Boothby in from what was at the time P15, and it looks as though he's going for his 2nd stop. Now if this is the case, Boothby will be trying to undercut a huge amount of the field, and if this is going to see him jump up into the top 5, it will be a fantastic piece of strategy. But meanwhile, whilst he's coming into the pits, we can see Cormac Ryan Meaden here down in what is P16 as we've got the Cosmos Racing Esports Ferrari going wide there, and Vedsfield's also going to come on through with him, as we can see. That's very unfortunate there, as Vedfield now makes his way up the order, and it's the case that the driver behind the DeMarco just loses out as they make the way up towards turn number 2, and Vedsfield continues on his merry way and chases after Ryan Meaden once again. But meanwhile, we look from those drivers to the battle for what is the final position inside the top 10, and it's Pushkarev right now, who as he makes his way through the left-hander sequence here. Well, it's the case that Mooney has found a way past, but Mooney with that 10-second penalty, and in the end I think this was always going to happen on circuit between the two drivers in terms of swapping places, and Pushkarev doesn't need to do anything here in terms of he doesn't need to make any major battle out of this. He just needs to run behind the Porsche driver if he wants to get the place back, or at least that's what we would theorise he needs to do. It may be a different story in practice if he finds that Mooney suddenly starts to fall off the pace and Pushkarev can go faster, that's something that the Armentero red driver will know in his mind. He will have a delta in terms of pace to run to, and he will do his best to run to it as much as he possibly can as he makes his way down onto the common straight once again here, and we can see that Mooney now making his way past the back marker there, and I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that may be Emil Blaine. Well, in fact, Emil Blaine is into the pits here. They've had to put the car in, and is this a retirement for Emil Blaine? He was running down towards the back, and it's indeed Andreas Sorensen, his teammate from the NRT Nordic Racing Team, the Dane, as he makes his way through the chase right now down in P33. He's made both of his pit stops, to be fair, right now, so Sorensen just needs to get on with his race. He is a number of laps down, but he may be able to gain some positions late on by simply not having to pit anymore. We'll definitely keep our eyes on Sorensen to see if he comes through the field and gets himself into the top 30, if not the top 20, but we'll have to wait to see as he now makes his way onto what for him is lap number 19. But meanwhile, we look from him to a little bit further up the order, and we can see it's the situation whereby we do have Chris Sawyer here, who is in P23, and he's got George Boothby ahead of him, and George Boothby having cleared those 2 pit stops right now. You can imagine that the Porsche driver at this point will now be rubbing his hands together and thinking, right, it's time to go to work, and the ACC team will be pushing him on, no doubt, as he makes his way, and we can see they're coming into the pits. That's Luca Filippi as he makes his way on in, and Izo just ahead right now, the Cortec Racing Aston Martin driver. Now this is what Boothby will be hoping for, that he's timed it right, as we're going to see more and more drivers come into the pits. And speaking of pit stops here, Luke Whitehead into the pits. He's just completed his, well, he's coming, well, I believe he's completed his pit stop right now, and as a result, Whitehead, well, where's he going to emerge versus Boothby? We will find out very shortly. Well, Boothby's come out ahead of Whitehead here, and I do wonder whether the Yas Heat driver has pulled a strategic masterclass so far, because he's up into P18, and remember, other than the, well, it's the case, other than Whitehead, who's going to be behind him when Whitehead finally crosses the sector timing line, Boothby right now, we would expect, is going to be our lead driver who's done both pit stops, and everybody else up the road from him will either have to do 2 or at least 1 pit stop. So this is really going to open up proceedings, as we see our time screen is finally updated, and Boothby gaining massively here on the strategy, and Whitehead trying to do something similar as a result. And the 2 Porsche drivers now are going to be ones to watch. How rapidly do they scythe their way up through the field through drivers coming into the pits, as we see a new Frev into the pits in the lead, and that means that Dow King will once again take the lead of the race, and he's got Andres Mesa over the back of him. I think for these 2 drivers now, in terms of their strategies, where they're going this long as the rain is continuing to increase in its density in terms of it falling for the next 10 minutes, but in the next half an hour we are expecting some of the clouds to go away. This is now where the conditions are going to get tricky for our drivers, because in that 30-minute window, so that will be when there's only approximately 16 minutes remaining in this race, I think our leaders right now are trying to stay out there until the remaining 20 minutes and then do their pit stops for the reduced rainfall. I think that's their target, because for them to go so long right now, they've reached the halfway point of the race effectively, and they've yet to pit. It's one of those situations where I think they're trying to outlast the conditions and wait for the conditions to turn in their favour, as Onufriev still in the pits at this point, and he's going for a very long stop. It's been Onufriev as he's now making his way out. He's dropped down to P11 already, and what about the drivers coming on through? That's the big question, as Vesfield is also into the pits for his second stop. We see Cormac Ryan Meenan here coming through the opening corner. Now will he emerge? No, he doesn't quite jump out ahead of what is Onufriev. Onufriev is not too far up the road, and this will be great inspiration for Cormac Ryan Meenan. He will know that he's timed his stop very well, and he's actually just come out behind the driver who was the leader for a considerable period of time. So I think the FFS Racing driver here will take confidence from this, as though the strategy is working in his favour, as we also see Kevin Gelling into the pits. In fact, he's just coming out of his pit box and making his way around. He's going to drop down to P16, as you can see there. George Boothby coming out ahead, and look at this, Kevin Gelling just emerging ahead of what is the driver, the Porsche driver there of Whitefield, as they make their way down the, Whitehead I should say, as they make their way down towards turn number 2, and as they come rip-roaring on down once again here, the strategies now intersecting one another. But you have to imagine that with getting here in P16 as he makes his way around through turn number 2 at this point, it's going to be one of those situations where he will now know he's got to make one more stop. But does he fight versus the drivers behind? And the one driver who will want to come through this order as quickly as possible will be Whitehead. He now needs to find a way on through. He needs to be in the dust troughs of what is Boothby. He does not want to lose sight of the ACC Heat driver right now, because otherwise this is going to turn from what was expected to be quite an interesting strategy into a disaster class of a strategy as he comes through turn number 9 here. But Whitehead will know this. He'll be pushing on as much as he possibly can as he comes through McPhillamy Park once again here. But the first driver on his list is Gelling, of course, who's in P16 ahead of him. But meanwhile, going from P16 to P15, a driver who we've yet to really talk about, Giovanni Izzo, as he makes his way through. The Cortec Racing driver here, keeping it nice and smooth in P15 right now. He's got one more stop to make, to be fair, but he'll be very aware of that. And as he makes his way through turn number 18 right now, the Cortec Racing driver really driving subtly and not getting the limelight, unlike his teammate Nimbrini, who's right up in P4. But you have to imagine that right now the Cortec Racing team happy with how their drivers are going so far and continue to press on. And speaking of pressing on, he pressed into the pits, and it is Pushkrev for his first pit stop. And how will this affect the standings? Well, it is the case that right now, as our leaders continue to make their way on through, King here leading by only 7/10 of a second versus Andres Mesa. Things are really starting to intensify as our drivers continue to push on. And as we can see, our race leader at this time, we are here, and there is a potential drive-through coming up for another driver. We'll tell you about that very shortly, but I do believe the stewards have got some more verdicts coming very shortly, as we've got a yellow flag out on circuit, as we see Dow King here just trying to hold on to that lead for the time being versus Andres Mesa. But now the real problem for these guys is if they are trying to go as long as possible to essentially match themselves to the conditions, so particularly that drop in rainfall towards the end of the race. Remember, they still got to do 2 pit stops here. The problem will be is when do they put those pit stops together, because right now you'd have to imagine that with George Boothby having a clear run for the best part of a good portion of his outlap so far after his second stop. He's currently P14, but he's going to be coming up the field rapidly, as Pushkrev has just come out ahead of George Boothby from what I'm hearing in my ear. But it's a case that the delta right now, well, we've got that extra pit stop still to go. In fact, Pushkrev has come out behind George Boothby when all is said and done, as we see Dow King gets it very wrong on the exit of the chase. And as they both peel into the pits, they're both drivers deciding to come on in, and I believe that will mean that Killian Ryan Meenan will take a lap of this race as the leader right now as he comes on through the final corner. We saw then Nimbrini also coming in, so the majority of our leaders deciding enough's enough, they need to take their first stop. And with 41.5 minutes remaining, it is now the Irishman of Ryan Meenan, Killian Ryan Meenan in full, one of the 2 brothers here, who takes the lead. And this, I think, for him will make him smile from here too. He may not be the overall winner tonight, but knowing that he's led a lap, and it is a massive upturn in his fortunes after the rather difficult opening 2 rounds. Well, I do think he will be very pleased with this right now. But whilst we could sing his praises for the time being, we do need to look back to Tinko van der Velde in P2 at this point in time, as we do see the Dutchman here pressing on all the same as Van der Velde chases after Ryan Meenan. And be fair for Van der Velde, it was a very strong start for the Dutchman, but it went wrong with that impact into the wall coming out of turn number 6 into 7. And now the number 66 driver at this point, I think he's just trying to salvage this back into the top 5. He can do it. The damage was light, but it was enough to unsettle him, and he's now been battling uphill all the way through as he makes his way there through turn number 7. You see how close he was previously getting to the wall. visible and no longer as close. He's definitely wary of that wall as he comes through turn number 8. But all the strategies tiptoeing over one another right now. To give you an update on where George Boothby is in terms of our field, well, he's now making his way onto another lap. He's going on to lap number 23. Remember, he is our lead driver who has done both of his pit stops at this time. So really, he's the driver right now who everybody ahead of him needs to be wary of. And the question will be, what has happened in the battle between Dale King and Andres Mesa? Well, Dale King has come back out in P5 when all is said and done after his opening stop. Meanwhile, it's the case that Andres Mesa has come out in P10 and Nambrini has come out a bit further back down in what looks to be P12. So I think really right now George Boothby will be closing up to the back of these guys gradually over the pit window, but there's got to be a reaction within the next 40 minutes, of course, where it's the likes of King, Mooney and company. They've all got to pit as we see Shermatinsky there tucked in behind what was, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, the Ballers Esport Bentley. And as they make their way down, it is the case that Bentley, one of our back markers, moving out the way as they come charging on through. And Shermatinsky right now our lead Bentley driver in this race as he makes his way in towards the heavy braking zone for what is the chase chicane. And you can see there behind we've got the battle between the Dragons Esport machine, and it's the case that the Ballers machine knocked wide a little bit there as there was that contact in the rear of your picture, but they've settled it back down. But that was very, very unfortunate, and I do believe that Bentley is in as we can see Shermatinsky makes his way through onto another lap once again. But meanwhile, Dylan Tan into the pits from P3, and indeed it's all erupting right now as we're hearing that with regards to that contact, that was Matija Vaca who was involved in the contact with Christian Krivic there, and Krivic just getting a little bit wrong under braking, the car just dragging its way forwards rather than turning in, and he wanted to try and get that move on the inside, but the car just understeered as you see a flash of lights there from Dale King behind. King, of course, trying to come through to lap Krivic, and I think flashing those lights as feverishly as possible to get the message on through as our drivers make their way around on their respective laps right now. Abakumov into the pits in P36, and I believe that is to clear his last pit stop, as meanwhile our drivers continue around, and a majority of the bottom portion of the field have cleared their 2 stops already. Meanwhile, the top portion of the field, the majority have yet to clear both of their stops. And this is a very oddball mechanic, I must say, or dynamic, in the fact that the majority of our leaders have decided to take their final pit stop as late into the race as possible. We'd normally expect it to perhaps be the other way around, but given how dangerous traffic can be here in terms of how much time you lose when you're caught behind someone on the mountain, it's understandable why our leaders are trying to take their pit stops as late as possible. As Kuric, they're going very high on the curb on the exit 9, almost clipping the wall. It calls the right tyre on the front from his perspective to raise, and now it's the case that King has to find his way on through. And remembering that Krivic, remember that he is a lap down on King behind him, but trying to let a driver through here at Bathurst over the mountain is a nightmare in itself. And as they make their way down, this will be where he lets King through. He'll be in the run down onto Conrad here, but King will have felt the pinch. He will feel this pain in terms of being caught behind the driver ahead of him as they now make their way onto the Conrad straight, and he will look to come through as we've got a drive-through penalty for Luke Whitehead. Now this is going to be a huge upset, and I think this is going to take him out of contention for a potential 3rd podium in 3 races. Now, why is the question I'm sure many of you will be asking. It is a drive-through penalty to car number 16. Well, no, drive-through penalty to car 21 for making contact into the corner with car number 16, and that contact was with the car of, if you give me a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen, car number 16, as we look down our chart here. That was Matija Vaca. So Whitehead there, a drive-through with Matija Vaca, and that is very, very unfortunate. And now it is the case that, well, Whitehead is going to be, I think, cursing his stars, because this was looking to be a very strong opportunity. As we see there in front, it was one of the Cortec Racing Aston Martins with a very battered front end. But right now, with these penalties still coming on in, anything can happen. As talking about drivers where anything can happen right now, Raymond Mooney, well, in the race at Kyalami, he decided that he was going to be the earliest of our drivers to pit, and now he's deciding to be one of the latest of our drivers to be hitting. And Raymond Mooney, much like our top 3, has yet to take a single pit stop, and instead he's now out in front versus Cherepenin here. But Cherepenin surely, well, I think it's going to be the case that Cherepenin's going to be held up here as they make their way into the cutting. Now, to be fair, when I say held up, it's not the case that Mooney has to move out of the way. These two are racing for position, but Danila Cherepenin, who we ride on board with right now, as he has to deal with that huge spray off the back of the 911 as they make the way out of 6 and into 7 here. The S&P Racing eSport driver will be feeling that pinch massively, and this is biting into his race time in terms of the fact that right now you would expect, given he was our leader before the pit stop window really started to open up, now he's got to try and find his way past the driver who's yet to pit and is holding on to track position. Well, as he comes down here into the dipper, and my goodness, being able to see here, it's absolutely scary to me, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here in the nice warm commentary box at one side of the circuit. I can tell you would not want to be in that car. You've got to have balls of steel with these cars and with these drivers in particular, with these conditions, as he now makes his way out of what is Forest Elbow here and charges down onto Conrad. You can see he's not able to get close up here versus Mooney, and this is really biting in to his opportunities. But to be fair, he will gain on the straight here versus Mooney, and this will help him gain a little bit of time back. As he gains right now, can he look for the move here in towards what is the chase chicane? He's going to get closer and close up. He's going to look for it. He's gone down the inside, and as our camera finally builds around, Cherepenin here does go for the move, but Mooney tries to come back around the outside here, and Mooney not giving this one up, and this is not what Cherepenin will want as Mooney continues to stay out, and Cherepenin now looks to return to the inside here into Murray's corner, and Mooney just simply not fazed by the presence of the McLaren driver right now, and this is not good news to the S&P Racing Esports team. They will not avoid to see this. All the strategic calculations could not have calculated for this, as we're hearing that King is in from what is his second pit stop, I believe, and King getting out of the way now will surely bring him back into contention with George Boothby, who's making his way on through. Now, where is George Boothby, I hear you ask? Well, the Briton is making his way through the chase and heading down towards what is turn number 23, but where is Dale King by comparison? Well, King making his way out of the pits right now, and as he emerges here, he's going to come out very clear, George Boothby, by a considerable margin. But to be fair, you can see here, look at the traffic that's ahead of King as they make the way up the hill. Now, this is not ideal as they make the way up towards turn number 2. You see George Boothby in the background there, so that is the delta that Boothby's now got to try and close down. And in terms of lap times, it's the situation where I can tell you that the Briton on 2:13s right now. And Will King, of course, we won't know his lap time until he's done a couple more laps here. I think King at this point could end up triggering off the wave of pit stops from our leaders, as we can see that King has come out into a absolutely huge amount of traffic, and this is not good as we see there. That is the Food Point Racing Aston Martin, well, that's the Rasket Racing Aston Martin of what is Nesta Mejia moving out the way, and as they make the way on through the corners right now, this is getting very tricky for all the drivers. And Nesta Mejia, to be fair, in P26, he's having a good race right now, got himself into the top 30, but Dale King will want to clear this traffic as quickly as possible, as we see that Mooney has got into P4, but he's still got that 10-second penalty, and that's the one thing we can remind drivers, he's still holding off Cherepenin here as they make the way down towards the chase once again. And as we look back to this battle for P4, now what will Cherepenin do? Will he look to the outside to inside instead of the inside to outside here? Well, he's going to look for, he's all over the back, and as they come into the braking zone here, I think Cherepenin a lot closer this time, but he's gone very deep and he's gone wide, and Cherepenin now returns to the circuit, but he's lost it here, and he's lost the position once again. And now as he peels into the pits, I think he's decided enough's enough, I've got to come in and clear that second stop, and that is a disaster for the driver because he has lost out massively here, and this could really throw things open because King, in terms of where Dale King is right now, he's coming down. As we look from the helicam, he's making his way down into the chicane here, so surely King is going to take the lead of the drivers who've made both of their pit stops, and if that's the case, King could theoretically now be our overall race lead, as we see him doing a little bit of waving from side to side here. Now, whether he's just trying to get some temperature in the tyres or he knows the camera's on him, you can only tell, or he'll be only be able to tell as he makes his way out the final corner here. But as he comes charging down, you see Cherepenin in the pits there, so King is now going to be your leading driver to have cleared both of their pit stops, and this is going to open things up massively for King as he makes his way up the hill once again. Now, as they make their own free, you see Dylan Tan there going very wide out of turn number 1. He's ahead of what is Cherepenin behind. Cherepenin's come out right in the cluster of traffic, and you can see George Boothby is closing up to the back of this as well, so it's anything but over right now, and Tan's got another pit stop to do, and you see Tan here not fighting here with Cherepenin. He knows the McLaren driver is faster and he's on a different strategy. He does not want to be a part of this. They are staying well clear of one another as they make their way up the hill, but this strategy is now opening up, and the problem is The difficulty will now be that for Tan, he's got to try and maintain his pace because effectively he's in a battle to finish inside the top 20, if not higher. But do also remember our top 3 have yet to pit. In fact, our top 4 have yet to make their pit stops, and as a result, and that's both of their pit stops, they haven't even made one right now. And then it's from P5 to P8 who've made one pit stop, and then we can see, as we see Dylan Tan, they're getting it very wrong in the run through turn number 9, as we see a Cosmos Esport Ferrari moving out the way as well. It's getting a very nip and tuck here as all our drivers trying to navigate around one another, and further back we can see Booby making his way past what is, oh goodness me, Booby getting it wrong there, and to take the cut across the run through the skyline and into the dipper there, and Booby just simply locking up on the brakes and deciding, you know what, I'm going to simply let the car roll there. He will get a track limits warning for that from race control, but I think he will be allowed a number of those given the conditions. And meanwhile, he makes his way on down once again. He's chasing after King, and well indeed he's chasing after Cherepenin as well, and he can see them both up ahead of him. But meanwhile, as they make their way on through, we look back to Christian Nembrini in P8 right now, and Nembrini, well, he's being reeled in by King considerably here, and he himself is trying to reel in DeMarco here as these drivers are out of position in terms of their relative positions on the strategy. Will we see one of them defect to the pits? We see DeMarco into the pits here, and meanwhile you can see behind King now closing. King, of course, our lead driver who's made both pit stops here. I think Nembrini will see the writing on the wall in terms of he won't be racing King and Cherepenin behind because they're too close for him to jump them on strategy, and indeed fighting them would only cost him time to the likes of DeMarco around him. But for now, Nembrini is continuing on with half an hour of this race to go, and as they make their way around right now, let me know, ladies and gentlemen, in the chat who you think your top 3 is going to be in this race right now. But I'll be honest with you, I do think that it's a close call between King and Cherepenin right now, and I do think those two are going to be on the podium at the pace they're showing, but we will have to wait and see. I couldn't tell you who's going to be the winner, but it is going to get close, and I think it's going to be King, Cherepenin, and then potentially either Nufriev or Vuvby who are going to be on that final step of the podium, or at least on the podium somewhere, as we hear that DeMarco has now cleared his pit stops. And meanwhile, Ryan Meenan into the pits. Ryan Meenan, he's in the pits right now, having to do an additional stop here. I think something's gone wrong for the Irishman, and they're not moving that car out of the pits, and this is a disaster if so, as they just waited to try and get it out. But meanwhile, our race leader, the other of the Ryan Meenan clan, as we can see here, Killian making his way through turn number 1. He's got Tinko van der Velde 6.4 seconds behind him. Both of these drivers have yet to make a pit stop, and as they come on through, it's the case that for Ryan Meenan right now, he's definitely enjoying being the race leader, that's for certain, and I think the FFS racing team will be very happy to see their car getting a bit of camera time in the lead of this race, as meanwhile at the front of the camera we see the Cosmos Racing driver there moving out of the way of Vesfield from ITR as they come charging up towards turn number 2 once again. Now as they make their way up, we're hearing it's getting very nip and tuck further down, and we can see going from one set of Cosmos Racing team drivers to another, it's Mahir Aratojo here who's ahead of what is Benjamin Asili, and they are both chasing after Luca Filippi here as we ride on board with Benjamin Asili as he charges up the hill. Now as he makes his way up here, he's got the double toe, but he's also got the double spray of both his teammate and the Waller Racing driver, and this of course very tricky to deal with into the braking zone for turn 2. As they make their way through the corners here, we are hearing in terms of our weather radar that the rain is now starting to ease within the next 10 minutes, so it's come a little bit sooner as we are getting the wind starting to push the clouds onto the push the clouds away from the circuit. So as a result, we are expecting the rain or the standing water on the circuit to decrease a bit, and this could be the opportunity for our race leaders to start to make those critical pit stops. We'll have to wait and find out, but we continue to watch the battle for P18 here as all 3 of our drivers in the picture, albeit you can't quite see Filippi at the head of this pack as they all make their way into McPhillamy Park here. And then believe it, I think that is Effenstedt ahead of the trio, and as they make their way all the way on through here, that is Rainer Effenstedt at the head of the pack, and they come charging down into the dip here. He's yet to make his second pit stop, and Effenstedt getting it very wrong there, offline into the dip, and how he did not hit the wall there, it's beyond me, but that's very great car control from the TG Racing eSport driver. And as they come down into Forest Elbow here, you can see he's got the snake train of Ferraris behind him, and I think he'll do everything he can to try and hold them at bay, but it's going to be futile because he's got to to pit at some point, whereas they've all cleared their pit stops. And as they make their way all the way down towards the chase once again, we ride on board here with the McLaren as the Ferrari army continues to charge after, and the Italian Stallions will just try to find a way on through as soon as possible. They'll all be grateful for the tow of the McLaren, of course, and as they come down to the braking zone here, will we see anything? No, we don't. We see the two Cosmos. Oh, goodness me! And that is Mahir Haritojo getting it Benjamin Asili getting it very wrong and simply outbraking himself into the corner and almost clipping the back of his teammate. And that is very unfortunate for Asili, who has now returned, but he's dropped the place there to Harry Phillips, who moves up into P20, and you can see coming through on the inside there, we do have the lead driver, the number 81 car of what is Ivan Sherman-Tinsky, who's a lap ahead of Asili, and we can see that the two drivers squabbling over position, and Asili not, I don't think, recognising those blue flags are for him. As you can see, it's a case that Sherman-Tinsky in the end moves clear, and Asili moves out the way right at the end there. I think that was a bit unfortunate, a bit of a mistime between the drivers, but behind them, meanwhile, we can see we do have Kevin Gerlin here in the Ferrari, in the ITR Ferrari, and behind him is Soldatov, and Soldatov, after those early pit stops, it's all gone wrong for Soldatov. He's dropped well down the order here, and as a result, he's now in P22, chasing after Gerlin, and a B feather for the number 723 driver, doing everything he can in terms of trying to hold on as they make their way up the hill once again. And indeed, they're in an Ultra Game in the YouTube chat. Fantastic racing so far from these drivers in tricky conditions up and down the field. Astounding driving from all of our drivers, and plenty to watch and plenty to enjoy. And right now, Kevin Gerlin, I think, enjoying the race, regardless of whether he's in P21, alternatively P11. If he was in P1, it would be a bit different, I can definitely tell you that. But right now, making his way on through, and meanwhile, it's the case that Killian Ryan Meenan has made, well, he's made one of his pit stops. He hasn't made both of them, he's made one, but he's come out in P4 here, and he's still got one more to make, but he's come out behind a colossal traffic jam, and this is not good reading for the FFS Racing team right now. As we can see, they've got the Cosmos Racing Ferrari moving out the way, and I believe that's the Ferrari Vasily moving out the way as all these drivers coming on through. But you can see ahead, they do have the Dragons Esport Aston Martin there of Courage needing to move out the way. He's in B20. Oh, goodness me! And who's that into the wall? Is that Sherman-Tinsky? I believe that's Sherman-Tinsky into the wall, and that's a disaster for the S&P Racing Esport driver. Now, was there contact? I'm not 100% sure, but he was into the wall there at the weirdest of angles, looking into the wall on the outside, and what was, excuse me, it's a Forest elbow. As you can see here, coming down his inside right now is Anuferev, and Sherman-Tinsky with that damage right now, I think it is a case of that opportunity to be on the podium for the S&P Racing Esport driver, even the top 5, may now be in tatters because he's still got to make his 2 mandatory pit stops. And Anuferev just coming charged on through the pitch here, flashes lights. I think the M2 competition driver essentially saying to him, look, I know you're probably frustrated right now, but just be aware you've got a fast charging Aston Martin that doesn't want your frustration projected onto it. And indeed, the Russian right now of Anuferev putting on a display in P4, and he is chasing after Killian Ryan Meenan, who's just up the road and has also made 1 stop but not 2. But Tinko van der Velde, our race leader at this point, he is a good margin clear of the chasing pack, but he's still got 2 pit stops to make here. And for the Dutchman right now, well, when is he going to pit? He's going so deep into this race, and this is impressive stuff, and his pace has been 2.12s and 2.13s ever since the collision with the wall. That brake tap as he taps the wall again there at turn number 9, and he's got to be careful because every little bump and scrape is only going to hurt him considerably as he makes his way on down. But meanwhile, further down the order, it's a case that still the leaders of the pack that have made both their pit stops, we can see it's still Dale King who's leading ahead of Cherepenin by 2.5 seconds. And where is Cherepenin, you ask? Well, here he is, the McLaren driver, after what was that difficult moment on his second stint. He had to abort the second stint there. I think he wanted to go longer, but Mooney was now having none of it, and Mooney right now, Raymond Mooney, has yet to pit. He's got a 10-second penalty as well to take, and I think our 2 leaders, what they're trying to do is just go so close to the end and have those pit stops right at the end of the race, because right now, as the weather is continuing to ease off a little bit, although you wouldn't think that based on the pictures on your screen, I can tell you that rain is starting to lessen a little bit, and I think Van der Velde and Mooney are waiting for that transition point compared to the rest of the field. And Sherman-Tinsky was also looking for that, and Sherman-Tinsky is still out there on circuit. He has not pitted despite the damage to his Bentley in Going to be in P5, as we can see here, Cherepenin now looking to get the move on the TUG of Racing. Ferrari of what was Waterlux there, moving out the way. Waterlux all the way down in P30, completing our top 30 at this current point in time. And you can see him here in the number 224 car as he makes his way up towards what is Forest Elbow. But meanwhile, as we look from P30 to a bit further up the order, in the meantime, we can see that it's Haritojo in P17 who's chasing after Effenstedt. And Effenstedt's still ahead, and this is not ideal for Haritojo. He's flashing his lights here. Of course, that's just to distract. He can't use that to try and essentially get Effenstedt to move out the way as if it's a blue flag. So Effenstedt will be told there's no blue flags, my friend. It's the case, just carry on racing. And as they make their way charging up the hill, it's the case the Cosmos Racing Team driver here really up against it, trying to find a way on through. But you could see the difference between the two cars here. Well, that McLaren just has a little bit more straight line speed and better exit out of the corners, and that Ferrari just does not seem to have a response, at least on the first half of the lap. It's on the second half where it does have that response. And meanwhile, as we hear that Giovanni Izzo has come into the pits and they've had to retire the car, which is very unfortunate. We've lost one of the Cortex Racing drivers. We look a little bit further down the order and we can see Harry Phillips here, the Wild Things Racing driver in the Bentley, our second highest Bentley as it currently stands, as we see Felipe behind there with Soldatov trying to go around the inside to outside here. They're side by side coming up through 5 and into 6, and surely not. They're not going to go 2 by 2 for it. No, they're not. And in the end, they settle back into an order. But he's going to look for it here, Soldatov. He's coming from the inside. They make their way through, and Felipe goes into the wall. Oh, goodness me, we've got, well, the Ferrari's coming through, and that's a disaster. I believe that's Ryan Meenan, who was one of our leaders, who's had to take evasive action. And oh my good lord, Ryan Meenan there, killing Ryan Meenan as Felipe pulls over to the side of the road, and Meenan will have absolutely had a heart attack from that, for the simple reason he will not have seen that Ferrari there until it was literally a case he had to take that evasive action. And Meenan, well, he's going to lose time to our race leader, and he'll lose time to the guys behind, but he's been able to save the car here. Now, can he save a potential podium or a top 5? That'll be the big question. Anuvriev a bit further back will know that he's going to be able to close up with that incident occurring, as finally your race leader, who's yet to pit, Tinko van der Velde, has come in from the lead to take his first of his 2 stops here with 20 minutes of racing remaining. Well, by the time he's done with his pit stop, it'll be about 18 minutes. But my goodness, it's DeMarco into the pits here to clear his final pit stop. And now we will see how all of our drivers come up through the field, as we see that Dow King here chasing down Nembrini. But remember, Nembrini has yet to stop and has yet to take his second stop, I should say. So as a result, Nembrini will be fighting against the tide here, as the Cortex Racing driver will have the Jota McLaren closing up inch by inch, lap by lap. And as they make their way down into towards turn number 21, through the chase they come. It's a situation right now, I think Nembrini will be thinking about that pit stop soon enough. And he doesn't this time, of course, but Dow King will be getting closer, and I think he'll be hoping that Nembrini just simply moves aside here. Of course, there's no need for him to. He can fight for this position, but I think he'll be thinking, you know what, just play the game of you're in a different race compared to me. As meanwhile, Ryan Meenan into the pits here, and he's making his way out now. That means that it's going to be King who's taking what is effectively the lead of our drivers who have made their second stop. And Ryan Meenan, where does he come out in all of this? We're waiting to see him at the rear view picture, and you can see that is killing Ryan Meenan there, coming out of the pits, and he's out ahead of George Boothby here. Now, he will need to get that car back up to speed here, but he has also got a back marker between himself and the driver behind, and that is the back marker of Walter Lux there. So I think Ryan Meenan has timed this right, and if it weren't for that moment coming through turn number 9, I think Ryan Meenan, he wouldn't have come out up against King and Cherepenin, but he would have been a bit closer here. But still, he will take positives from this in terms of he's inched a bit closer, and he's now moving up the field, and he's got ahead of George Booby, which is critical in terms of his race at this point and getting ahead. But meanwhile, as our drivers continue around, we look towards what is our leader once again, and Tinko van der Velde here, where he's made that pit stop, and he's only got a 10-second gap over Anuvriev right now. So I think van der Velde will not be coming back out in the lead once he's made his second stop. But the big question will be, what about the Vasily Anuvriev right now, who does appear to be on an absolute stormer in terms of his race. And as he comes down the straight here, down towards what is turn number 20 and into the chase chicane once again here with a little bit of traffic ahead of him. It's not going to pinch him too hard, is the traffic. He's not going to get caught up to it too soon. In fact, this actually works out in his favour, because he'll be closing up to the traffic quite nicely here and get a good tow down towards the chase chicane. It's one of those situations where I think for Anuvriev, When is he going to pull the trigger on that final pit stop? Because he will know that King and Cherepenin are quickly catching, and will they be able to jump in by undercutting very early on in the race? So that will be their challenge. As meanwhile, a bit further down the order, I can tell you that Konstantin Soldatov, meanwhile, chasing after what is Harry Phillips here in P17, as we've had the drivers making their way on through. All these drivers, of course, have made their second pit stop, so no more stops expected for them. It's now all about a charge to the finish. There, as we see a Ferrari getting it wrong, we're looking at 2M2 competition, Aston Martins, Soldatov in the front of the picture, and then what is a Nufriev at the rear of your picture, and this shows you the difference in pace, as we're hearing that Christian Nembarini is into the pits, and what was at the time P4. So Dow King has now been released, and King is continuing to climb up the order in terms of those strategies coming to light. So we are still waiting to see when our top three will make their second stop, but as they do right now, I can also tell you that Sherman Tinsky is now coming in for his second stop here, and the S&P Racing eSport driver coming on in for what is a pit stop, which he would have been hoping would have seen him come out towards the front, but due to that incident going into Forest Elbow, he will now be coming out looking to try and hold on to a top 15 or so come the end of this race. But it's not over until the checkered flag, so let's not count him out just yet, as Marcus Fox in P14 right now. And to be fair to Marcus Fox, whilst we haven't seen too much of him, and he's also had a little bit of bump and scrape here and there, Fox, you have to say, is putting in a good performance, and right now he could be seeing himself with an outside chance of finishing in the top 10 if things carry on as they are, although I do think it's more going to be looking like a potential opportunity for, say, P14 to P12 as he makes his way down the Conrad Straight. But we look from Fox to a little bit further down the order, and we can see that meanwhile a driver who we haven't seen too much of, it is Alexei Yujigov here, as he makes his way through at P26 right now. And I must admit, ladies and gentlemen, we have lost a number of drivers over the course of this race. We still do have 29 drivers classified as running as it currently stands, I believe, and our last driver at this point in time is Cyril Panzera in what is P29 here, as he makes his way through, and the leaders are coming past the Cosmos Racing Team driver here, and these tricky conditions have caught out so many drivers. But with 14.5 minutes to go, to all of our drivers who are still racing, all those who did join the race at the start and they've had to retire, the courage they've had to show to go out in these conditions is absolutely phenomenal, and nothing can be taken from them. But I can tell you one thing right now, something that can be taken from someone, that lead is likely to be taken from Tinko van der Velde, as we look at him making his way out of turn number 1 and heading up the mountain straight towards turn number 2. You can see in the rear of your picture there, Anufriev continuing to charge after van der Velde. They've both got to make one more pit stop, and Andres Mesa a little bit further back. Meanwhile, it is the case that King in P4, well, where is Dow King? He is making his way around and coming to the end of his 30 full lap. So I think King right now could be looking to come out ahead of these guys. We'll have to wait and see when that pit stop occurs. I think what our leaders, our top three, are gambling on right now, what they're banking on, is with the rain continuing to ease slightly over the course of the next 10 minutes, they can go for that pit stop right at the end, and they don't have to essentially make that pit stop and they have to deal with the changing conditions with the tyres losing temperature whilst they're in the pits. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but it is looking as though it's all going to come together right at the end. But speaking of coming together right now, that's Harry Phillips, and my apologies, that was not Anufriev on the offensive versus Harry Phillips, as he gets it very wrong there. And Kevin Gelling now closing up to the back of the Wild Things Racing driver there, who went a little bit sideways through turn number 9, and Gelling looking for the move here, surely not over a skyline, my goodness, as Gelling tries to find a way on through, and this is a P17 if he can get it, as we ride on board here with the Ferrari driver, the Intruder Racing Team driver, as he makes his way down through the dipper. Now, one of the other things he was saying to me in the build-up to tonight, Gelling, was that he was hoping that his teammates would have good races because of how gifted and talented they are, but I think he's underestimated his own talents as he tries to chase after the Bentley driver here, and he's just trying to do his best and give more than his best here today. Well, he's trying to turn this into a good top 20 result, and he is pushing on right now, but you can see the difference between the two, albeit once they get towards top gear, look at how rapidly he's closing down that Bentley ahead of him right now. It's getting closer and closer and closer, but he's not able to go for the move here into the chicane as he waits for another opportunity. He does the Intruder Racing Team driver here, but with a little clip of the curb there on the apex of turn 21, he now has to back off and wait for another opportunity, but he is trying to get on the heels of the Bentley driver. And Phillips, to be fair, despite that little moment at turn 9 unsettling him, he's very quickly got his head back down and getting on with the racing, and Phillips able to do that there, very resilient. As meanwhile, a bit further down, just outside of the top 20, we see Chris Zoiger here chasing after Sorensen. And in fact, as they make their way on down into the braking zone, I think that is Sorensen behind him now, unless I'm very much mistaken. Indeed, that is. That's Sorensen, who has been passed by Chris Zoiger there. As we can see, Andreas Sorensen just behind right now in P22 as we're waiting for our time screen to update. And it is the case, the Aston Martin driver chasing after the Swiss. But I think the Dane at this point is just trying to bring home that P22 result. And if he can have an opportunity at gaining that P21, he will go for it. It's behind him. You can see Nestor Magia closing even up on this battle for P21. Indeed, for Nestor Magia, he will also be thinking about whether he can perhaps sneak into the top 20 when all is said and done. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. As I can tell you that right now we're not seeing any more pit stops at this time. I think it's the case that our remaining drivers to make their second pit stop are all waiting for that last possible moment, waiting for the tide to turn in their favour, as we've got 11 minutes to go, approximately 6 more laps of racing here at Bathurst. And my goodness, what a race it's been right now. And we can see that as our drivers continue to make their way around the battle for P21, all in a single camera shot there. Chris Zoiger get the lead in P21, and then you can see it, Sorensen and Magia behind. A bit further back, we do have what is Krivic down in my apologies, down in P24, and he's just coming out of turn number 1 right now. But meanwhile, looking from Krivic to a driver who's really had to make some salvation out of this race, looking at the Porsche of Luke Whitehead after that drive-through penalty, put a scupper to his race, and he is chasing after Pushkarev right now, and then Nembrini. But keeping in mind that Pushkarev has to make one more pit stop, and then it's Mooney Tan up ahead in P8, P9. It'll be the case that Whitehead will be looking to try and jump them as they make their pit stops here. So Whitehead still trying to chase after a top 10 finish here, but he's definitely made it difficult for himself with that drive-through penalty, and now he's got to really now every single lap. Our fastest driver at this point in the race, I can tell you, is, well, as I look to my time screens, obviously you can't see these on screen, is Dow King right now. King is the fastest man on circuit, and as we look at the Jota McLaren, as Tinko van der Velde's into the pit, I can see him out in the commentary box window, and now will Dow King come through as we see a Ferrari there while the Cosmos Racing drivers getting it a bit wrong in the exit 22, and Dow King flashing his lights here. He knows how critical this is, and I do think that the Jota McLaren, as he makes his way out of 23 and heads down towards turn number 1 here, he'll come on through. Van der Velde is still up on the jacks here, and as King comes through, well, if Tinko van der Velde's going to fall, we can see Andres Mesa just at the front of your camera here, and Van der Velde's coming out of the pits now. It's a case with 9.5 minutes to go. Could King jump everybody into the lead, and then he will have the field chasing him to the end here, and whoa, goodness me, if that is the case, and then right now for King, he is on course to snatch this win off of everybody right now after what was a rather haphazard start for a number of drivers, including King, with that little mistake earlier on in the race. It has turned around, but Tinko van der Velde, if we know one thing about the Dutchman, he will literally now see the King ahead of him and be thinking, right, I've got one mission: beat the McLaren ahead of me, take on the Jota McLaren. Team Tonki are going to take the win, and right now Van der Velde immediately going to work it. You could see the ferocity as he's making his way on through the corners, and in fact as we ride on board with Van der Velde here as he takes us around for the circuit, it is the case you can see King and this, oh goodness me, and Van der Velde clipping the wall there, and he's done that a number of times over the mountain. He will not want to keep doing that, because that will upset the steering rack no doubt and could cause irreparable damage to the suspension. He needs to be on the offensive, but not that too much. Take it out in cutting down the gap, Van der Velde. Don't take it out on our poor barriers, because they won't like it when you do, as he makes his way down into Forest Elbow here, and Van der Velde pushing on, but you could see already that damage has opened the gap up a little bit, but Van der Velde definitely pushing it to the utmost here. He knows that he has got to hunt down King. He's not going to inherit this win as he makes his way down onto the Conrad Straight. As he makes his way down, meanwhile, we look a little bit further down the order once again here, and we can see that it's Killian Ryan Meenan right now, who is in P6. He's ahead of George Booby still, and also, oh goodness me, and what on earth has happened there? We've got, that's a Cosmos Racing eSport Ferrari getting it all sorts of wrong there. Now, I'm not sure what's happened, but I can tell you that George Booby has come cleanly through that, whether he was involved in some sort of contact, but that was absolutely horrific. Well, it's not Haratojo, because he's up in P16 right now, but one of the Cosmos Racing drivers has just had a huge moment in the rundown conrod there, and I think it has been cleared that that was a sight for sore eyes as our drivers continue on around here, and we look to Haritojo, who will probably be hearing on the radio about his teammate very shortly. But meanwhile, just behind him as he holds on to P16, we can see that Harry Phillips has still got the Ferrari of what is Kevin Gelling behind here as Phillips tries to hold on in the Bentley, and where it's the case that Gelling will be trying to find every which way through as they make their way up through the cutting and now to turns 5 and 6. Now, what do you do in this scenario when you're Gelling? In terms of trying to find a way past the venerable Bentley here, where you've got to get closer in the run to Forest Elba here. You've got to be so close that you can pretty much sniff the exhaust fumes off the back of that Bentley going into Forest Elba. That's the distance you need. But you can see as they make their way from McPhillamy here, how Gelling is close up. And in fact, I think he's now trying to inch himself closer here. But it's whether he can maintain. Oh, goodness me, Gelling clipping the wall there in towards the dropout of Skyline and almost getting upset in the car. And that's how close these guys are running it to the wall at Bathurst. But Gelling really just pushing it some and then beyond the limit as they come into Forest Elba. Oh, goodness me, and Phillips getting it all sorts of wrong under braking, and that's because he's got the traffic ahead of him. And as they make their way through Forest Elba and down to the Conrod Straight, the drivers in a horrible situation here. Well, Gelling's going to be rather fortunate. He will get a double toe, but I think Phillips in the toe of the Cosmos driver ahead of him, and that's Haritojo. I think it's the case that Phillips will gain enough here to stay alive, or will he as he comes down into the chase? And you can see it's the case that Gelling's looking for it. Phillips thinks about going defensive, but then Gelling does not go for it. Instead, they all stay as they were. But Haritojo under huge pressure here with 5.5 minutes remaining by the time they come out the final corner to go on to another lap. And as they make their way to the end of lap 37, I can tell you our leaders are well on their way round through lap number 38. And indeed, our race leaders just gone on to lap 39. That's Vasily and Nufriev who's gone on to lap 39 as we see Phillips here looking for that potential move on Haritojo, but he can't find it as our battle for P16 rages on. You can see the two M2 competition Aston Martins running up the hill, as meanwhile it looks as though Gelling's now looking for the move here as they head up towards what is turn number 2. And as the camera pans round, it is a situation, well, when the camera eventually pans round, in fact we get the helicam, Phillips having to go defensive here down into the corner, and oh goodness me, Gelling up on the grass, Phillips getting a tap, and Phillips loses control of the car there into the back of Haritojo. But I think that was a freeway incident in the end. I think Gelling was involved in that one as well, and that is very unfortunate as literally the smallest of taps between the cars caused the drivers to, well, particularly Phillips and Gelling, to get upset, and as a result their cars in the end seeing Haritojo getting caught into that incident. And my goodness, well, Haritojo has lost out massively as we can see Phillips here staying clear of Andres Mesa, and these guys good friends off circuit and great rivals on circuit, albeit not on the same lap today. And meanwhile we can see that Kevin Gelling has soldiered on here in P16, and we'll have to wait to hear what the stewards have got to think about that one. But Gelling right now doing the sensible thing of just getting back on with the race, and particularly over the mountain here in these tricky conditions, and letting the stewards give him the update as to what's happened with that one. And meanwhile I can tell you that in the battle for the lead, where is the case of Nufriev and Andres Mesa have yet to make their second pit stop still. And meanwhile in P3, and really our driver who right now I think it's going to be a case that many will be expecting to potentially take the lead come at the very end here, Dow King, in terms of his lap times, his last lap a 2:11.7 compared to a 2:13.2 from Tingo van der Velde behind. And I think van der Velde has given it up. He's thrown in the towel because he's not able to close up, and Danila Cherepenin here is closing up to the back of Tingo van der Velde as Killian Ryan Meenan, you saw there in the rear of your picture as the camera span round, and Cherepenin is continuing to chase down the McLaren ahead of him right now. It is 3 McLarens that are looking to take to the podium here as Andres Mesa and Nufriev have still yet to pit. They will be able to pit on lap number 40, but I believe after they must pit at the end of the next lap, otherwise they will be disqualified for not meeting the pit stop requirements. Oh goodness me, and Harry Phillips has gone a bit wide there. I think that may also be due to the damage to the car and letting the leaders through as he makes his way into the pits. We've got yellow flags out on circuit as Andres Mesa is into the pits here, and he is coming for that second stop, and he's going to drop some way down the order now. Now how far down will he drop as we see George Boothby here making his way through the final corner? He's going to gain the position on Andres Mesa Mesa, or is he? That's the big question, as we're hearing that it is the case that Phillips has had to retire the car due to damage. So we are getting multiple retirements from this race. And now, as we see here, it's George Boothby who makes his way out of turn number 1. Well, he's up into P6 as we see Andres Mesa coming through, and behind that is Raymond Mooney. And Mooney, in the end, by going so long, we still got to make another pit stop, Mooney, to be fair. So he's just trying to stay out of trouble and go as long as he possibly can, but he's got to pit at the end of this lap, otherwise he will not meet the mandatory pit requirements right now. But Mooney going the longest of everyone, including Anuferev as well, and it is the case that this time Mooney deciding that he doesn't want to pit until the last possible moment, whereas at Kyalami it was he wanted to pit as soon as possible. As we end at Christian Nembrini into the pits as well, we've still got some pit stops coming through, and Nembrini with an unscheduled stop. As we see Mooney making his way on through, but meanwhile our race leader Vasily Anuferev here making his way down. He has an 18-second advantage over Dale King, but remember, with that pit stop and that pit time loss is well beyond the 18 seconds, and I think here for Anuferev it will be the case that he's just going to gradually look to bring home a top 5 here, or just finish outside the top 5. We'll have to wait and see, as he will make that pit stop soon. But meanwhile in P10 right now and chasing over after Whitehead, and this is the battle for P9. Dylan Tan, our Turkish driver from Legion of Racers here in the number 144 machine, trying to put that pressure on Whitehead at the very end. And as they make their way up onto the mountain now and come through turn at number 7 once again here, it's the situation what I do think for Tan as he tries to build that pressure. Will he be able to do so? He's going to have one more lap after this, as your leader is into the pits. The leader is now onto that last lap, of course, and as these guys make them over the mountain, we can see Dow King here coming down towards the final corner. Now, will it have been enough to take the lead, or will Anuferev have done enough to come back out in the lead? We wait to see here. This is going to be critical as King comes across that line to go onto the final lap. Now, where is Anuferev? He's making his way out of his pit box, we're hearing, but as we can see Dow King coming through the opening corner. Where's Anuferev on the right hand side of your camera? He's not there. Dow King takes the lead of this race. Tinko van der Velde, and also what appears to be Cherepenin coming through, and then behind you can see there is Anuferev, and that is the difference between the pit stops. It's a case that King, van der Velde and Cherepenin have all undercut the rest of the lead pack, albeit Cherepenin was compromised by running behind Mooney, and that has cost him the ability to be in the lead of this hunt for the podium. But meanwhile, it's the situation where Dow King right now, well, he's on his final lap, and on his debut he's making it to the end and he's looking to be the winner. But of course, let's not curse him, because at the moment he's still got to do one more lap, as meanwhile Tinko van der Velde has got Cherepenin all over the back of him, albeit the gap's only 1.1 seconds. He is getting closer and closer to Cherepenin, and Cherepenin at this point will be looking to try and take what for him will be at least a podium, but he will want that P2 to expand his championship lead over Whitehead, who is going to finish considerably down the order in P9. He'll get some good points, but it's not enough. And as they make their way over Skyline once again here, can Cherepenin find a way to close it? I don't think he can. I don't think he's got enough in the tank, as we hear a drive-through penalty for Kevin Gellin, and I believe that's for the incident with Harry Phillips earlier on, and also the Haritoja being collected by that incident, as Harry Phillips has retired the car as well. So both drivers having a bad day at the box office. But meanwhile, as they all come through camera here, it's the case that Van der Velde just trying to hold on, but as they make their way down, it's the case that we can see Dow King now making his way down towards the chicane here. And well, he's only debuted in this series today, but as he makes his way on down towards the chicane, he started towards the front of the field with a great qualifying session, getting it hooked up, and as he makes his way through the last 3 corners, that's 2 of them done, 1 more to go. He's going to come down to Murray's corner, and he's played this right on the strategy, and now I think that's shaking for the cameras in joy, because as he makes his way through the left-hander, it will be Dow King from the Jota McLaren team who takes the win at Bathurst at Mount Panorama. Behind in P2 it will be Tinko van der Velde with a brilliant drive as well, and then holding on to P3 it will be Danila Cherepenin, P4 Vasily Anuferev here, and then it's going to be Killian Ryan Meenan, who for FFS Racing they will be absolutely joyful at P5 from Ryan Meenan, and it will then be George Boothby who comes home in P6 with a rather clever take on the strategy, but it wasn't to be in terms of getting himself into the top 5, as a 15-second penalty there for George Boothby, and Andres Mesa P17, and then it's going to be Luke Whitehead when all is said and done here, as he makes one for. I'm not sure what Booby's got a 15-second penalty for out of nowhere, but that may throw up the standing somewhat. But staying with what we have at the moment, it's going to be Whitehead who comes across the line in the end in P8 when all's said and done. He comes through a left-hander here. Good spin, and Tan's all over the back of him here, and I think Tan's actually going to jump into the line, and it's the case that Tan does, and meanwhile Raymond Mooney does as well, because Whitehead ran out of fuel on the finish line, and Whitehead comes home with a top 10, but it wasn't the top 10 he wanted, running out of fuel literally hundreds of metres before crossing that timing line. Meanwhile, it's going to be Pavel Pushkarev who finishes just outside of our top 10 here. He'll finish in P11, and my goodness, it's a crazy ending to what has been crazy conditions and a crazy race. And now we can see Pushkarev coming across the line with literally Whitehead having to sit there as a passenger in his car as they all come across. Konstantin Soldatov will then come home in P12 when all is said and done here. He makes his way down towards the chicane here, and to be fair to Soldatov, he played a gamble on the strategy. He decided to go very early. He came out in traffic, but in the end he did try it to be inventive, and he almost made it work, as we do see Andre Jacklin there at the head of the camera, the Armentero red Ferrari making its way through, and that's Yujigov is going to finish just ahead of him. And as they make their way across the line, Konstantin Soldatov will take P12, and then we've got Marcus Fox there, P13. A good drive from the Fox Sim Racing driver after a difficult qualifying session. Kevin Gellin in the end, I believe he has served his penalty, so we are going to see Gellin to be the last of our drivers, I believe, to complete the race on effectively what is the lead lap as he comes on down here. We're just going to wait for him to take to that finish line as the ITR driver makes his way through, and a difficult race for the ITR driver, but I think he will take inspiration from this one, that he has bounced back to some degree, and he has put in one heck of a heartfelt performance as he now makes his way through the final corner. He comes out there and completes our lead lap order, coming home in P14, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the race at Mount Panorama. And now it is time to prepare for those post-race interviews. Don't go anywhere, you won't want to miss them. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. And unfortunately, due to a little bit of a mix-up, we're not quite going to be able to bring you our post-race interview of Dow King immediately. We are trying to grab Dow King at the moment, but he's not available. So instead, we're going to kick off with our interview with second place man, Tinko van der Velde. Let's get him into the interview room. Hello Tinko, can you hear me?
Hello, yeah, I can.
Brilliant. Tinko, it looked an absolutely difficult race out there from start to finish, but you brought it home in P2 when all was said and done. How do you feel about second place today at Bathurst?
Yeah, pretty happy because the start didn't look that well for me. I don't know what happened. My setup just didn't really work at the start, and I suddenly got a lot of understeer and into the wall. So I got 15 seconds damage, so that was really bad for the start, and I dropped down to I think P6 or something. So I just thought like, hopefully I can still maintain P6 or something, but at the end I don't know what happened. I just stayed out and everyone lost a lot of time for some reason. So yeah, then 2 pit stops with 1 leader, quick pit stops, didn't change any tires or something, and I got into P2, but then I scraped the wall and I got an extra 15 seconds damage and suspension damage. My whole wheel was crooked for some reason, so I don't know why that happened. I think it was a bug, but still P2, I'm really happy with that, but I think it could have been P1 without that.
Oh, it's very unfortunate. We did see a number of times when you did clip the wall, particularly I think there was one major moment coming through turn 6 and up into 7 you hit the inside wall, and then later on hitting the outside wall at turn number 9. Just take us through what it's like driving at Bathurst, because to be driving on the limit and in that rain as well, I mean, to be pushing so hard and clipping the wall, is it only natural, or is it one of those situations whereby it's just you've got to be right on the limit at Bathurst?
Yeah, it was so hard. At the start I just didn't really have the concentration, so I just didn't push that much, because if I pushed I just knew I would hit the wall, and I eventually did hit the wall a few times. It just with the rain, it's so easy to get some understeer, and then you can't just brake or slow down. You just get so much understeer, you're going into the wall no matter what. You can't save it, so it's so hard to maintain just the lead or just maintain the pace, because yeah, it's so easy to get into the walls with the rain.
I see, but with those conditions as well, and well, taking it a step forward really in terms of the strategy, we saw the amount of rain changing over the course of the 90-minute race. We were increasing for the first half of the race and then starting to drop towards the very end. How are you looking to deal with that changing level of rain on the circuit? How does that play into your strategy?
Not really at all, to be honest. It was just the lap times were dropping the first half, and then we gained back some lap time, but it didn't really feel that much different in driving. We got a little bit more grip towards the end, but in terms of strategy there was not really anything different.
I see, and now looking from today's race, of course, whilst it wasn't perhaps the result you wanted and the damage you picked up, it's still got 2 more races to go, and next week we're off to the United States for Laguna Seca. How are you feeling for the American circuit?
Pretty good. I had a endurance race a few weeks ago there, and had a podium with the McLaren as well, so I do have a setup for that, so I'm prepared. I don't know how the new update stacks up with BLP, but we'll see.
Well, we do look forward to seeing you take to Laguna Seca in a week's time, but until then, whilst it wasn't the win you were looking for today, congratulations on the second place, and thank you for joining us in the interview room.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Good night. So hearing there from Tinko van der Velde, who seemed, I think, in 2 minds by the sounds of things in terms of it wasn't the result he wanted, and picking up 30 seconds worth of damage from those 2 contacts with the wall, and still bringing it home literally on their heels of Dow King at the end of the race there. You have to say that van der Velde, I can understand why he probably feels quite disappointed, but at the same time I think he'll also be thinking to himself later on when he gives it 24 hours to have a think about it, that, well, you know what, we still salvaged a P2, and it is a positive result, and he will now look to push on all the same going into Laguna Seca. It was very fast paced there and definitely shown again. But we are just trying to grab now Dow King. We are going to try and bring him in very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. So we are going to try and get with our race winner. We are potentially going to be grabbing Dow King very shortly. I believe we have managed to prize him away, so we are just going to bring him into the interview room. So we'll just bring him in now. Hello, Dow, can you hear me?
How you doing, Paul? You okay?
All good, thank you. How about yourself?
Sweating, Paul. I just lost 2 stone. Oh my god.
Well, I was going to say congratulations on taking the win in what has been one of the most trickiest races we've ever seen at Next Gen. How does it feel to have won at Bathurst in some ferocious conditions?
Yeah, awesome. It was a crazy race. Literally, the first few laps you couldn't see nothing, and then obviously the back markers were giving off spray as well, and most of the back markers were really fast as well. So it's hard to overtake. Yeah, just a crazy race of strategy as well. With Fatal going light on fuel and taking tyres. I thought maybe he was going to get me at the end, but yeah, it just worked out okay as well. Getting in front of Tinko there as well.
Oh, it did work out for yourself. And just dialing it back to qualifying and particularly debuting in the series. We saw in qualifying you put the Jota McLaren on the front pair of rows in the end. Did you have a little bit more in the tank with regards to qualifying, or was that the best you could do?
No, yeah, I was actually, I think I was actually up 4 attempts at one point, but I got hit. I got stuck going down the mountain by a Ferrari. And then the next lap I tried, I sort of bottled it going down the mountain again, and I couldn't sort of replicate the lap. So yeah, a bit unlucky to be fair.
And then taking that into the race, of course, knowing that you had a bit more pace in the reserve, what was the plan stocks? We saw quite a back and forth between yourself and the whole pack of leaders, really, whether it be Van der Velde, Cherepenin, and also we did see within there the Ferrari of Ryan Meenan as well. Was the plan to sort of stay with them or try and make the break? What was going through your mind?
Yeah, so I wanted to try and get out front just because of the spray. Literally, and if you're a couple of cars deep, you can't really see it. If someone makes a mistake, it's so easy to hit them, and especially going up the mountain as well. Now in the spray, the walls just appear instantly, and as you know, one little tap round here in the wet, you can go around, and then the whole pack of just sort of go through your car. So yeah, just sort of wanted to start the front and just try to manage the race, because it's the first time I've actually used a McLaren, and it was a little bit sketchy going down Conrad into that left. I think the elbow, I kept losing it there a little bit. So I thought if I was out front, maybe I could manage it a little bit better.
I see, and in terms of the strategy you applied on top of that, we saw you split your pit stops in a rather mismatch in terms of taking one pit stop right towards the middle of the race and then the other one quite soon after in terms of making a short second stint. Was the logic to try and undercut the leaders?
No, so what actually happened, the first pit stop I did, my tyre pressures, I couldn't get the pressures back up. So I tried to pit again and increase the pressures, but it just didn't work. I don't know if it's a new patch or something, because normally when you increase the pressures, even if you don't change tyres, it goes up, but it didn't. So yeah, that's the reason why I sort of double stacked the pit stops pretty quickly. But yeah, luckily, thank God, it started to dry up and my pressures went back up to a decent range where I could be competitive again.
And then, well, with that coming back and the tyres coming back into form for yourself, just take us through what was happening in your mind, whether you were absolutely smug. I believe you're also streaming this race from your perspective. Just take us through the reaction when you saw that you'd taken the lead with 1 lap to go, and it was the case that the drivers who'd yet to pit all came up behind yourself, Van der Velde and Cherepenin.
Yeah, it was just don't bin it, right? that was all I was thinking, just taking it super easy. I must have looked like an 80-year-old driver, you know. I think my head was in front of the wheel at one point. So yeah, right against the screen there. But yeah, super great feeling, you know, to come here and win my first race in probably the craziest conditions I've raced in a long time.
Oh, that's brilliant. Then one last question for yourself. Next week we head to Laguna Seca. We head across the United States. How are you feeling for the American circuit?
Yeah, good. I like Laguna. I think the McLaren's pretty strong there now as well. So maybe we can give the Porsches a run for their money, especially if it's wet, right? Should be fun.
Oh, indeed. Well, I don't know if we can promise you wet weather conditions, but what I can say is congratulations on a fantastic win once again, and we look forward to seeing you take to the American circuit in a week's time.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
All the best. Hearing there from Dow King, very happy with his performance on his debut, and in the end taking that win, an emphatic win, and definitely be one to watch going to Laguna Seca in a week's time. But now, as we come to our third place interview, what I will say, ladies and gentlemen, is unfortunately I won't be able to bring you a direct interview with Danila Cherepenin, and the reason for that is because unfortunately he's unavailable for interview, and I do believe, and this is not to discredit the Russian, I don't think he speaks very good English. So as a result, what we've asked is that his colleague from S&P, Kirill Lobanov, has provided us with some thoughts, which I'm just going to read out to you, and I'm very grateful for Lobanov for helping us out here. What Danila had to say was it was an interesting race, and he had some interesting fights. Don't completely agree with the penalty he received, but the referee's decision, either the steward's decision, it's the steward's decision. So see you next round, and I think that I'll come back stronger. Indeed, Cherepenin will be going into the next round as our overall championship leader, if I'm not mistaken, and as a result, he will carry that momentum forward, and he'll be very interesting to watch at Laguna Seca. So without further ado then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. This has been round number 3 of the 5-round Intercontinental Challenge Championship for 2021, as brought to you by NXTGEN Racing in collaboration with the SimGrid and Coach Dave Academy. And if you do want to know more about us at NXTGEN Racing, why not check us out, our official racing website, that's nextgenracing.co.uk, alternatively our Facebook group, that's www.facebook.com/groups/NextGen Racing. Also a huge thank you to our partners, without whom this would not be possible, the SimGrid and Coach Dave Academy. And now we look forward to next time, December the 14th. It will be Laguna Seca, the American circuit, with the all-awe-inspiring corkscrew corner. How will our drivers get on the American asphalt? We'll have to wait and see. But I can tell you one thing, ladies and gentlemen, whether it be sunshine or rain, there's going to be plenty of racing action and plenty to shout home about. But until then, we have been NXTGEN Racing. I have been Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit. And until next time, from all of us here, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, thank you for watching, and remember to stay on track. Good night.